Chapter 5204. She wants to end the fight quickly? Duan Muyu was shocked, but she was not surprised. Since she had already run out of true qi in the previous round, it was impossible for her to fully recover even after 2 days of rest. Especially when facing a strong opponent, ending the battle as soon as possible could be said to be the only choice. In fact, it wasn't just cooled. Duan Muyu had the same thought. She was facing the same predicament as cooled. If she couldn't think of a way to end the fight quickly, it would be hard to predict how the situation would develop. Bam! Both of them launched their kicks at the same time, but neither of them touched the other because they were aiming for the other's vitals. This had nothing to do with the Ming men of the moves. It was a direct way of exchanging lives for lives. Everyone gasped in unison, stunned. Even if the outcome of this fight was directly related to the qualification to enter the Archean trials, there was no need to fight so desperately right from the start, was there? Ling Shan and the others' hearts skipped a beat. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Fortunately, both of them didn't really exchange lives for lives. They both chose to pull back their legs at the last moment. Just when everyone let out a sigh of relief, the same scene happened again. Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. They only relaxed when the two of them separated again. It was like a roller coaster. This isn't good. I'm afraid it'll go against the strategy of ending the fight quickly if this goes on. Duan Muyu looked at Cooled, who was charging at her with a serious face. She frowned as she used the method of exchanging lives for lives to force her to retreat. She had no other choice. She didn't dare to take Cooled's moves head-on because she was afraid of the legendary Ice Shatter physique. Otherwise, even if she had chi protection, she would be gradually affected. Once her speed was limited, she would be trapped. Therefore, she could only use such a method to force Cooled to retreat. However, it would gradually evolve into a battle of physical strength and vital energy. The situation would go out of control after a while. If the situation was still the same, she might not be able to hold back her attack and it would really turn into a mutual destruction. Seeing that Cooled was attacking again, Duan Muyu changed her strategy. A withered leaf fell from her palm, and she disappeared. The bleak autumn atmosphere instantly swept across the field. The fall of a leaf signified the beginning of autumn. Here comes the show. Everyone's spirits were lifted. According to Duan Muyu's previous habits, after falling leaves indicates autumn would be followed by a leaf like a mountain, and the winner would be decided soon. Unexpectedly, at the same moment, a bone-chilling coldness enveloped the entire place, and the source was Lung Lung. Prison on the ground? Everyone was shocked again, and they looked at each other. But we can't even see Duan Muyu's figure. Even so, he can still use prison of drawn ground. Furthermore, it covers such a large area. Isn't this too exaggerated? Although it's a prison with herself as the target. Cooled is really going all out this time. Lin Yi could not help but smile when he saw that. In theory, prison on the ground would only be used when the opponent was locked. However, under special circumstances, it could also target Cooled herself like what she was doing now. The shattered ice constitution had a magnifying effect on this, which was enough to expand the range of prison on the ground by several times. However, even Cooled herself would suffer from frostbite, just that it would not be as serious as the average person. Everyone had yet to understand what was going on, but for safety's sake, Xin Yijie once again led the crowd to retreat a good distance. Everyone only stopped when they were almost at the shore, for fear of being accidentally hurt by Cooled's prison on the ground. Cooled's surroundings were empty, and not a single figure could be found within a radius of 100 meters. However, everyone knew that Duan Muyu must be hiding in this open space, waiting for the opportunity to kill in one hit. However, where was she? Everyone, including Xin Yijie, was trying their best to find Duan Muyu's figure. However, it was destined to be useless. Duan Muyu had used it at least 3 times in the first 4 rounds of the competition. Unless she took the initiative to show herself, otherwise, even a beginner gold core expert like Xin Yijie would not be able to locate her position. If it was really that easy to be broken, Yi Luoji of Autumn would not have become the signature of Yi Ling sect. Of course, Lin Yi was the only exception. Yi Luoji of Autumn could deceive beginner gold core experts, but it would be too fake to deceive someone at his level. It was a pity that Cooled was not Lin Yi. Everyone could not detect Duan Muyu's position, and neither could she. That was why she used prison on herself. Otherwise, she would not have to take such a risk. This Cooled is really strong. Duan Muyu frowned when she saw this scene. She had indeed concealed herself with the help of the fallen leaves of autumn, but she could only hide from the other party's senses. She could clearly feel the bone-chilling coldness. In fact, because of the bleak autumn, she could feel it much more clearly than others. This bone-chilling coldness could really kill someone. This was not surprising. What really surprised Duan Muyu was that the power of prison on the ground could be raised to such a level in just 3 moves. It almost completely overturned her previous judgment. Duan Muyu was definitely one of the people who observed the battle between Cooled and Xue Jianfeng the most attentively. After all, both of them were very likely to be strong opponents that she would have to face. As the leading senior sister of Yi Ling sect, Duan Muyu's observation skills were absolutely top-notch. This was the minimum requirement to enter Yi Ling sect. Although she had only seen it once, she could already see some of the tricks of prison on the ground. Duan Muyu knew very well that this was a powerful killer move that needed to be laid down. The more laid down, the more powerful it would be. It was also because of this judgment that Duan Muyu was very determined to end the battle quickly from the beginning. Not only could she avoid the risk of overdrafting her vital energy and physical strength, but she could also restrain her opponent's most feared prison on the ground. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. If it was not for the fact that her Yi Luoji of autumn also needed a certain amount of time to accumulate, Duan Muyu would definitely have used it immediately. Of course, it was within the acceptable range if she could only deal with her opponent for 3 moves. However, she did not expect Cooled's prison on the ground to reach such a level after only 3 moves. It was even stronger than when she was fighting against Xue Jianfeng. In that case, could it be that her previous judgment was completely wrong? Duan Muyu's confidence could not help but waver. After all her speculations were based on appearances. To be honest, it was not easy to come to such a conclusion after only 1 observation. Unfortunately, she did not know the principle of prison on the ground. Chapter 5205. Even so, Duan Muyu did not reveal any flaws. She adjusted her strategy in an instant and prepared to snatch the attack. Falling leaves of autumn and 1 mountain-like leaf, this was the most common and most threatening combo move. It was also Duan Muyu's original plan. However, just like the falling leaves of autumn, this powerful and overbearing move needed time to charge up. Everyone knew about this routine, but it was still impossible to defend against it because no one knew where and when the attack of 1 mountain-like leaf would come from. The problem now was that she was affected by the bone-chilling cold of the painted ground prison. Duan Muyu discovered that the vital energy in her body was beginning to show signs of stagnation. If this continued, she would not be able to use her mountain leaf again. Instead of sitting on the ground and waiting for death, she might as well give it her all. A thin iron leaf appeared above Lung Lung's head out of thin air. It pressed down with an incomparably heavy and majestic aura. 1 mountain-like leaf. Boom. The iron leaf was only the size of a palm, but it left a clear leaf print the size of half a basketball court on the ground. The depth of the print was as high as a person's height. It was astounding. Ah! Lingshan and the others screamed when they saw this. Didn't this mean that Lung Lung was crushed to death by the 1 mountain-like leaf? However, they immediately breathed a sigh of relief because Lung Lung had already rushed out from the leaf print. Although she was obviously injured, judging from her current state, the injury should not be too serious. Is this guy made of iron? Someone could not help but exclaim. The others were also confused. They had seen the power of 1 mountain-like leaf with their own eyes. A foundation perfection perfected expert was blown away on the spot. Even if Lung Lung's strength was stronger than a foundation perfection perfected expert, she should not be able to jump around after taking on the 1 mountain-like leaf. This was too ridiculous. Xue Jianfeng snorted when he heard that. Most people could not understand the scene just now, but as a Golden Core Realm expert, he saw it clearly. Duan Muyu's 1 mountain-like leaf was indeed powerful. A normal foundation perfected expert would be courting death if he took it head-on. It was the same for Lung Lung. However, Cooled Lung did not take the attack head-on. Instead, she had already stepped on the ground and shrunk herself before the mountain-like leaf came crashing down. Instead of saying that the mountain-like leaf's power had landed on her body, it would be more accurate to say that most of the power had been absorbed by the ground. That was why she was able to sustain such a light injury. Xue Jianfeng secretly felt that it was a pity. He couldn't wait for Cooled to be beaten to death by Duan Muyu. He didn't expect that she actually escaped this calamity. Oh no. Duan Muyu's heart skipped a beat. She had already used up most of her true qi against knowledge of the autumn and mountain of fallen leaves. She had bet most of her chips on this. At the very least, she had to severely injure her opponent before she could take control of the situation. An opening. Lung Lung's eyes lit up. Without any hesitation, she rushed forward and gave him a head-on kick. With a bang, Duan Muyu was sent flying. What a pity. Lin Yi shook his head slightly as he witnessed the scene. Lung Lung had grasped the opportunity very well. Duan Muyu's momentary absent-mindedness had indeed exposed a small opening. However, Lung Lung was affected by her prison drawing, so her speed was obviously slower than usual. This gave her opponent a chance to defend himself hastily. Otherwise, the outcome of the battle would have been decided. Lung Lung also felt that it was a pity. Duan Muyu, on the other hand, could not help but secretly feel lucky. Even though she had already used her arms to block her chest before the opponent's kick landed on her, and her protective chi had been strengthened to its peak in an instant, she still received quite a bit of impact. A thin layer of frost was left on both of her arms. In a situation like this, the longer the fight dragged on, the greater the effect of the confinement spell would be. Her floor earlier was also affected by the confinement spell. After receiving Cooled Lung's kick head-on, the freezing effect was magnified infinitely. The white frost was the symbol. At this moment, she could not even feel the existence of both her arms. They were completely frozen. Phew. Lung Lung let out a long breath upon seeing the situation. She was about to give her opponent the final blow. Truth be told, even she could not withstand the powerful freezing effect of the prison drawing. If she continued to delay, she would probably follow in her opponent's footsteps. Should I admit defeat? Lung Lung suddenly stopped moving. There was no enmity between her and Duan Muyu. If it was not necessary, she did not want to deal a heavy blow. Otherwise, it would not only be a matter of elimination for Duan Muyu. It was unknown whether he could fully recover from the severe injury. If there were any sequelae because of this, it would be an endless trouble. No one knew the horror of the prison drawing better than herself. This degree of frostbite was not something that could be easily cured. What nonsense are you talking about? Duan Muyu glanced at her. A trace of determination suddenly flashed across her eyes. The battle has just begun, isn't it? As she spoke, a withered leaf slowly slid out from her palm. Everyone could not help but look at each other when they saw it. Was Duan Muyu still thinking of turning the tables with the falling leaves in autumn? Although his perseverance was commendable, it was too unrealistic, right? Lung Lung was also very puzzled. However, she reacted quickly. From her standpoint, it was already benevolent of her to give her opponent the chance to admit defeat. Since Duan Muyu insisted on fighting till the end, she could only fulfill his wish. Without another word, Lung Lung immediately gave her opponent the final blow. At this moment, both of Duan Muyu's arms were frozen numb. Even the movement of slipping out from the withered leaf seemed very clumsy, let alone fighting back. However, before Lung Lung could land her attack, Duan Muyu's body suddenly erupted with an incomparably strong vitality. As if it had materialized, his entire body was emitting a dazzling light. The withered leaf has turned green. Lin Yi looked at the withered leaf that was slowly falling to the ground in astonishment. At this moment, it had turned emerald green and was full of vitality. This is the withered leaf rejuvenation, Xin Yijie exclaimed. No wonder he, the junior uncle who led the team at the early stage of the Gold Core realm, was so shocked. In fact, not only him, even Bing Wuqing was visibly moved when she saw this scene. The withered leaf rejuvenation, like the falling leaves in autumn, was one of the few symbolic moves of the Yiling sect. However, it was never something that a foundation-building disciple could master. In theory, only a gold core expert could master it. No one would have thought that Duan Muyu, who was only at the foundation-building great completion, had already mastered this move. In this way, even if this woman's strength and potential were not comparable to the shocking geniuses like Leng Leng and Ling Tianyu, there was not much difference. Chapter 5206. Burning her life force in advance, and at the same time, a 3-month-long period of weakness. This is the price of rejuvenating withered leaves. She actually went this far just for a duel. Is this woman crazy? Bing Wuqing could not understand. In the eyes of a person who respected absolute rationality, Duan Muyu's actions were meaningless. Indeed, it was extremely likely that Duan Muyu would be able to win this battle by relying on the heaven-defying recovery effect of spring-withered leaves. However, so what if she obtained the qualifications to participate in the Primeval trials? There were less than 2 months left until the Primeval trials. In other words, she would be in a weakened state for at least a month, and participating in the Primeval trials in such a state was simply courting death. Instead of that, she might as well admit defeat. Even a child could distinguish the pros and cons of this. Was it just a momentary impulse? In fact, it was no wonder that Bing Wuqing could not understand. Even after her dantian was destroyed by Lin Dongfang, she had always maintained sufficient rationality. A momentary impulse was an experience she had never experienced before, so naturally, she could not understand. However, Xin Yijie could understand Duan Muyu's feelings. This was probably not a momentary impulse, but something she had long planned. Once the situation turned bad, she would use rejuvenating withered leaves and win at all costs. For Duan Muyu, this was not just because of the primordial trial qualification. More importantly, it was related to the reputation of the entire Yiling sect. She was the leading senior sister of the Yiling sect. If she could not even get the minimum qualification for the trial, wouldn't it be a disgrace to the entire Yiling sect? For the sake of the Yiling sect, Duan Muyu could not lose this duel no matter what. Absolutely not. Bystanders could see things clearly, but Leng Leng had never seen rejuvenating withered leaves before. Before she came to the secular world to train, she was only in the early stage of foundation establishment. Whether it was experience or strength, she was far from her level. In addition, she was from the always mysterious Yiling sect. Before this, she had never even heard of rejuvenating withered leaves, so she was at a loss for what to do. Bang! This time, it was Leng Leng who was sent flying. Duan Muyu, who had recovered to his peak state in an instant, was unstoppable. Even without a powerful move like a mountain-like leaf, Leng Leng, who had consumed a lot of energy, was no longer as strong as she wished. Immediately after that, Duan Muyu did not let Cooled Lung have the upper hand. He did not give Cooled Lung any chance to react at all as he followed up with a series of fierce attacks. Cooled Lung was completely at a disadvantage. Xin Yijie felt a little strange as he watched the two of them intertwining with each other. He could not help but mumble, "Since you've recovered to your peak state with rejuvenation, you should have used powerful moves like Falling Leaves of Autumn and Mountainous Leaf to end the battle as soon as possible. Why did you waste so much effort?" Ever since they had witnessed the power of the prison spell, everyone knew that they could not afford to drag out the fight with Cooled. Otherwise, the longer the fight dragged on, the more severe the frost damage they would suffer. Duan Muyu might have the upper hand now, but if he could not defeat Cooled in a short time, he might just fail miserably. Duan Muyu must be well aware of this, but she still insisted on choosing this method. Was there any special purpose? 5 more moves. Duan Muyu silently reminded herself in her heart. She was estimating the effects of the prison drawing on her. If this trend continued, she would probably be frozen again in another 5 moves. At that time, she would really be powerless to reverse the situation. 5 more moves. Cooled's judgment was the same as hers. As long as she could withstand 5 moves, she would win. With such judgment, the next 5 moves were destined to be thrilling. If the initial exchange of life for life was just a test, then this time it would be the real deal. The eyelids of the bystanders twitched. Both of them were injured every time they exchanged moves, but they maintained the toughest stance. Neither of them backed down. Once they backed down, they would lose. Are they still women? Why are they even more manly than us pure men? The men were sweating. A battle like this should be exciting, but it was a battle between two women. They did not know what to say. This battle is unexpectedly exciting. No matter who wins or loses, Cooled should be able to benefit a lot. Lin Yi nodded. Although he couldn't bear to watch Lung Lung get hurt, he wouldn't interrupt her as long as her life wasn't in danger. After all, there was nothing in this world that could make someone mature faster than an intense battle like this. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged 4 moves. There was only one move left to the bottom line of the judgment. There's no other way. Duan Muyu clenched her teeth. Her opponent's tenacity was far beyond her expectation. At this point, she could no longer hold back. She could only use the last of her vital energy to fight with all her might. One leaf like a mountain. Cooled's heart skipped a beat. In her current state, it was already very difficult for her to withstand the previous 4 moves. It was impossible for her to withstand the one leaf like a mountain. More importantly, her frostbite speed was greatly affected by her painted ground imprisonment. She could not dodge it even if she wanted to. There's no other way. Cooled said the same words as Duan Muyu. She did not dodge or dodge. She said in a deep voice as she formed a seal with her hands, "Ice prison mirror, shatter." As soon as she said that, everyone seemed to hear the sound of a huge ice mirror shattering. Then, not only in the field, but even the entire island's temperature suddenly dropped by a large margin, sending chills down everyone's spine. In the blink of an eye, the initially intense and explosive scene suddenly froze. The mountain-like leaf's powerful attack came to an abrupt halt. Cooled and Duan Muyu did not make any follow-up moves at the same time because both of them were frozen stiff. Shin Yijie looked at the scene with his mouth agape. He could not utter a proper sentence. Needless to say, the rest of them were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. I didn't expect her to use the ice prison mirror. This is really... Lin Yi was also a little shocked and did not know what to say. The ice prison mirror was the follow-up and advanced move of the painted ground imprisonment. The principle was to instantly erupt the bone-chilling coldness of the painted ground imprisonment in a more threatening way. However, as Cooled had yet to fully master the painted ground imprisonment, it was only a preliminary idea in Lin Yi's mind. He had yet to figure out the specific way of circulating vital energy. He did not expect Cooled to use it directly. Apart from her shocking innate talent, this girl's guts were also boundlessly big. It seems that both of them are frozen stiff and unable to move. Let's announce the result as soon as possible. Otherwise, there will be repercussions if they are frozen for too long. That'll be troublesome, said Lin Yi to Shin Yijie. Chapter 5207. Although Cooled and Duan Muyu had lost their ability to move at the same time, both of them were still conscious. It seemed like they were desperately mobilizing the vital qi in their bodies. Under such circumstances, whoever could stand up first would be the winner. As long as they waited patiently, there would definitely be a result. However, it was as Lin Yi had said, if they dragged it on like this, both of them would suffer from side effects from the cold. Compared to the outcome of this battle, the two of them were clearly more important. In this case, the result would be a big problem. After all, there had never been a tie in the trial competition. Moreover, this battle was directly related to the qualification for the Archean trial. Whoever lost would be directly eliminated. Even Shin Yijie could not come to a conclusion so easily. Needless to say, of course we'll wait for them to stand up on their own. Shui Jianfeng snorted coldly. He did not care about Duan Muyu, but it would be best if he could take this opportunity to cripple Cooled. That's impossible. Both Cooled and Duan Muyu are genius disciples with outstanding aptitudes. If something really happens to them, let alone Yi Ling sect, even the upper echelons of your Snowsword sect might not agree to it. Shin Yijie refuted immediately and said in a deep voice, I'm the person in charge of this trial competition. I have the right to make decisions on the spot. I can't do something as stupid as letting them freeze to death. Shui Jianfeng choked. Shin Yijie had the absolute right to speak, which he could not compete with. He could only take a step back and said, then what do you want to do? You're not siding with Cooled, are you? Although she's from my Snowsword sect, it's obvious that Duanmu you had the upper hand earlier. For the sake of fairness, I think Duanmu you should be the winner. Shin Yijie was speechless. Of course, he was siding with Cooled. However, the situation just now was exactly as Xue Jianfeng said. If Cooled won, not only would Duanmu you not agree, but the others would also say that he was sitting on the wrong seat. I don't think so. Why don't you think about who performed the Shattered Ice Prison Mirror? If it wasn't for the power of the Shattered Ice Prison Mirror, it wouldn't have caused such a situation. No matter how you look at it, it should be considered as Cooled's counterattack. Lin Yi immediately stood up and argued. Since it was related to Cooled's qualification for the Archean trial, he naturally would not sit idly by. Reactive strike. You even froze yourself to this state. Do you want me to die of laughter? Xue Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. If it's that funny, why aren't you dying from laughing? Ziyu stuck her tongue out. You. Xue Jianfeng's eyes turned cold, and he subconsciously wanted to make a move to teach this stinky girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. In the end, Lin Yi's stare made his hair stand on end, and he could only resentfully put away this thought. He muttered in his heart, this guy is clearly only at the great circle of foundation establishment, so why does he have such a frightening aura? Since everyone has their reasons, why don't we all vote together? Each leading senior brother from each sect has one vote. Whoever gets the most votes will be the winner, Shin Yijie said after thinking for a while. I have no objections. Let's let them start healing then. Lin Yi looked at him. If Shin Yijie was a little more daring, he'd definitely go against everyone's opinions and not use this kind of method to smooth things over. It looked like he didn't offend anyone, but in reality, he wasn't getting any favors from either side. The only good thing was that even if the Archean Alliance wanted to pursue the matter, he wouldn't have to take responsibility. After all, this was public opinion. It couldn't be helped. Shin Yijie was just that kind of person. He looked honest but was actually very sly. He was easy to talk to normally, but when it came to a critical moment, all he could do was to protect himself. Lin Yi wasn't surprised at all. Haha, you really know how to flatter yourself. You're not the leading senior brother of any Archean sect, you don't even have the right to vote. What kind of opinion can you have? Xue Jianfeng took the chance to taunt. Who said I don't? Shin Yijie snorted and immediately announced, Grandmaster is the most respected person in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Of course, Grandmaster has the final say on who the Green Cloud sect of the North Island wants to vote for. He also knew that his suggestion to let everyone vote had unwittingly displeased Lin Yi. At this time, of course, he had to think of a way to remedy the situation. Letting Lin Yi decide was equivalent to voting for Lung Lung in disguise, as a way to express his apology. All right then, I'll vote for Lung Lung, Lin Yi said bluntly. Some people are really mesmerized by lust, but I'm different. In this case, of course, we have to listen to the public opinion. The Snowsword faction votes for Duan Muyu, Xue Jianfeng said tit for tat. When he said this, he completely forgot about the existence of Bing Wuqing. It should be known that Bing Wuqing was above him in both strength and status. Moreover, Bing Wuqing's identity in the secular world was the Snowsword faction's leading senior uncle. She should be the one to make the decision, not Xue Jianfeng. Feeling a chill on his back, Xue Jianfeng suddenly reacted and hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. Grandmaster Bing must have the same idea, right? Bing Wuqing did not say anything. It was normal for her to express her dissatisfaction with Xue Jianfeng's decision, but it would be a little too obvious if she forcefully voted for Lung Lung. Therefore, she could only maintain her usual style and ignore it. After that, the leading senior brothers of the other primordial sects also expressed their opinions one after another. Soon, Shin Yijie got the tabulation results. Lung Lung has 7 votes, and Duan Muyu has 4 votes. So according to the voting results, Lung Lung should be the winner of this round, Shin Yijie announced. How could it be? Xue Jianfeng was very surprised. The result was really unexpected. He thought that with the strength of the gold core stage that he had shown before and the prestige he had in the past, he would definitely be able to get hundreds of people to respond to his call. The leading senior brothers of the other primordial sects would definitely curry favor with him. Who would have thought that everyone would go to curry favor with Lin Yi? Admittedly, the strength of the gold core stage that Xue Jianfeng had shown was a little scary, but in the end, he was just a beginner gold core stage expert. He could at most be a little deterrent to the crowd, but it was really too much to ask everyone to curry favor with him. Every primordial sect had a group of gold core stage experts. Even if they really did curry favor with Xue Jianfeng, what good would it do them? Chapter 5208. Even if there was no way to rope them in directly, they should at least build a good relationship with them and not become enemies. Otherwise, it would be a huge joke if Lin Yi were to publicize their sect's counter moves in a fit of anger. Lin Yi soon realized what everyone was thinking. Although he never intended to make a fuss about this, it was not a bad thing. Since the result is out, let's call it a day. Leng Leng and Duan Mu Yu, both of you can focus on recuperating. Don't leave any sequelae, Xin Yijie said immediately. Hold on, I think this voting is unfair, so it should not be counted. Xue Jianfeng jumped out to object again. Oh! Everyone voted on the spot without any chance to contact each other secretly. I would like to ask, how is it unfair? Xin Yijie frowned. I think with the level of these voters, not all of them can understand the meaning of this duel. How can the result be counted if a group of people who can't even understand the meaning of the duel be the judges? To ensure the fairness of the result, I suggest we follow the tradition of the Archaic Alliance and let the Golden Core experts vote, Xue Jianfeng said unscrupulously. As soon as he said that, everyone's face darkened. How could he say that their level was not high enough? Wasn't this guy looking down on them too much? However, Xue Jianfeng's words were not baseless. In the past, every competition in the Archaic Alliance was indeed judged by the Golden Core experts. Only they had enough vision to understand the whole meaning of the duel between Foundation Establishment disciples. Otherwise, as Xue Jianfeng said, ordinary Foundation Establishment perfected experts might not be able to understand what Leng Leng and Duanmu Yu had done. However, if it was really decided by the Golden Core experts, he, Bing Wuqing, and Xin Yijie were the only three people present. As long as there were no accidents, Bing Wuqing would definitely be on his side. Wouldn't it be up to him to decide? You're being unreasonable. Even if the Golden Core experts were to be the judges, they must be from different sects. Who is qualified to do that now? Xin Yijie refuted on the spot and then said decisively, it's hard to go against the will of the masses. I announce the winner of this duel is, at this moment, Lin Yi suddenly interrupted, since both sides are equally matched, how about we call it a draw? A draw? Xin Yijie was stunned and said awkwardly, but there has never been a tie. Moreover, this match is directly related to the qualification to participate in the Archean trial. Can't they both qualify for the trial at the same time? Although this is a bit of an exception, special cases are special cases. I don't think the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance would be so unreasonable. After all, these are two rare geniuses. It would be a pity if one of them was eliminated, said Lin Yi. Originally, whether Duanmu Yu qualified for the Archean trial or not had nothing to do with him. However, after watching this duel, this woman's determination really moved him. Moreover, Lin Yi was also very interested in the rejuvenation of withered leaves. There was no mention of this move in the summary of the mental cultivation methods sent by Tian Chan. Therefore, he might as well do her a favor. Maybe he could find a chance to get some words out of her in the future. Xin Yijie pondered for a moment and finally nodded. Yes, Grand Uncle Master is right. Rules are dead and people are alive. For this duel, Duanmu Yu even used the rejuvenation of withered leaves. It would be too unreasonable to force her to lose. Since that's the case, I'll declare it a draw. Nobody objected to this result. Firstly, it was to do Lin Yi a favor. Secondly, the result did not affect them at all. At most, Duanmu Yu qualified for the trial. Moreover, Duanmu Yu had just used the rejuvenation of withered leaves. It would be impossible for her to recover within 3 months. Even if she qualified for the trial, it would only be symbolic. Wait. Xue Jianfeng jumped out again and interrupted. What do you want? Xin Yijie, the honest man, finally got angry after being interrupted by this guy several times. He said with an unfriendly expression, "According to the results of the voting, cooled won. Announcing it as a draw is already very considerate of you. Shui Jianfeng, don't push your luck." This. Shui Jianfeng choked for a moment. At this moment, he actually felt a substantial killing intent from the other party for the first time. An honest man was really scary when he was angry. After choking for a moment, Shui Jianfeng finally chose to shut his mouth. Now, not only the honest man, Xin Yijie, was angry, but everyone else was also staring at him with an unfriendly expression. If this went on, he would completely offend the crowd. It was unnecessary just for such a small matter. In this way, the opening battle of the 5th round of the trial competition ended in a draw. Cooled and Duanmu Yu qualified for the Archean trial at the same time. Duanmu Yu panted weakly as she forced herself to lift her head to look at Linyi. Thank you. She knew very well that if it was not for Linyi's insistence, Cooled would have definitely won this battle. If that happened, she would be eliminated on the spot. Losing the qualification for the trial was a small matter, but it would affect the reputation of Yiling sect. That was why she was grateful. "You're welcome," Lin Yi said as he looked at her. Not only was she very weak, but she also suffered from severe frostbite due to the intense battle with Cooled. She was too close to Cooled when the ice prison mirror was broken. He said, "If you don't mind, how about I help you to heal your wound? I think it's hard for you to recover on your own in your current state, right?" But Duanmu Yu was a little hesitant. She was now in a weak state where the vital energy in her body was very weak. She did not know how long it would take for her to completely recover on her own. Moreover, the degree of frostbite from the ice prison mirror was not something that could be recovered easily unless there was a special medicinal pill in this area. "I'm going to heal Cooled anyway. If you don't mind, you can come along. It's no trouble at all." Lin Yi smiled. Duanmu Yu hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. "All right, thank you." With her status and background in Yiling sect, the sect's higher-ups would definitely think of a way if she made a request. However, it was a problem whether she could take the medicinal pill in her current state. If she was not careful, the life-saving medicinal pill might turn into a fatal poison instead. Instead of that, it was better to take the risk and trust Linyi for once. Chapter 5209. TCH, he doesn't even let Duanmu Yu go, what a pervert. Shui Jianfeng curled his lips at the scene, but there was an obvious jealousy in him. He'd been dreaming of replacing Linyi with himself. He had Lingshan and the others help Cooled and Duanmu Yu to a secluded area to sit down. He then sat down and started healing the two girls. The frostbite from the shattered ice prison mirror was very troublesome, and even a great recovery pill wouldn't have much of an effect. Lung Lung was fine, since she was the source of all the frostbite. Even if he got frostbite, it wouldn't be too serious. Duanmu Yu, on the other hand, was in trouble. Not only was her frostbite severe, but she was also in an extremely weak state. Even if she used qi to treat her wounds, it would be even worse if she used a great recovery pill. It was a good thing that Lin Yi's consciousness was much sharper than when he was on Skyclass Island, and his control of qi was much finer and sharper. Otherwise, he might really be helpless. Feeling the subtle changes in her body, Duanmu Yu's eyes widened in disbelief. This Lin Yi actually had such a miraculous healing method. "Don't move, or don't blame me if you lose control of your qi." Lin Yi frowned. I'm sorry." Duanmu Yu blushed and quickly suppressed the shock in her heart, trying her best not to move. After a while, Lung Lung's internal injuries were no longer a problem. She told Lin Yi about it and went to the side to continue her healing. Duanmu Yu, on the other hand, had only recovered a small portion of her injuries. "There's something I'm really curious about. I wonder if you could answer it for me," Lin Yi suddenly asked in the middle of healing. "Chem?" Duanmu Yu paused and reacted, "This is why you're healing me." "Don't worry, it's just a common question." Lin Yi smiled and asked, "Rejuvenation leaf should be a very costly move, right? Can you tell me about it? Overdrawing your life force in advance, plus a 3-month period of weakness." Duanmu Yu didn't try to hide anything. There was nothing to hide. Anyone in the Archaic Alliance with the slightest bit of experience would know this. What about the effect? After paying such a huge price, he must have recovered to his peak state, right? Why don't I look like it? Lin Yi continued to ask. You could tell? Duan Muyu was shocked. Nonsense, if you had really recovered to your peak state at that time, why would you need to be so restrained when facing cooled? I think it's because he doesn't have enough true qi in his body, so he doesn't dare to rashly use powerful moves, right? Lin Yi speculated. Even from his point of view, the combination of falling leaves in autumn and a mountain-like leaf was a very simple and unsolvable combo. Not to mention the foundation building stage, it would be very effective even in the gold core stage. It should not be a problem to deal with Lung Lung in that state. Duan Muyu went silent for a moment before he said slowly, since it's like that, then I won't conceal it anymore. I didn't utilize the complete version of rejuvenation, so I haven't recovered to my peak state. I've only recovered less than half of it. I see, then the period of weakness won't be as long as 3 months, right? Can I make it in time for the primordial trials? Lin Yi suddenly came to a realization. This Duan Muyu was not the kind of woman who only lived for the sect's reputation. The fact that she could use the incomplete version of rejuvenation in that situation not only proved that she had outstanding qualifications, but also proved that she was very smart. If everything goes well, it should be possible. Duan Muyu nodded. This primordial trials happened once in 1,000 years, she did not want to miss it no matter what. Then, I wish you all the best. Lin Yi suddenly stood up and said lightly, the frostbite has been cleared. You can only rely on yourself to slowly recover from the following matters. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. Duan Muyu sensed the condition of her body. As expected, other than being extremely weak, everything else was normal. She could not help but be surprised and happy. Seeing that Lin Yi was about to leave, she asked, Say, why did you help me? Could it be that you've fallen for me? Fat. Lin Yi's body staggered, almost choking on her words. Wasn't this woman a little too direct? What? Isn't it? Duan Muyu was stunned. In her opinion, since Lin Yi showed his goodwill to her for no reason and took the initiative to heal her, he must have some ulterior motives. It couldn't be that he really wanted to ask that common-sense question just now, right? Other than her looks, could it be that he had taken a fancy to something else? Although the word beauty didn't really match with Duan Muyu's manly temperament, it was undeniable that she was indeed a unique beauty. There was no lack of suitors in the small pugilistic world of the supreme ancient immortal realms, it was just that none of them could enter her sights. Being stared at by her like this, Lin Yi felt a little awkward. He thought for a moment and said, if I said that I was looking for an opportunity to secretly learn rejuvenation, would you believe me? Although this was mostly a joke, after witnessing the heaven-defying effects of rejuvenation, it would be a lie if Lin Yi said that he was not tempted at all. Although this move had terrible after-effects, the powerful effect of instantly restoring one's peak state was still very useful in certain situations. However, to Lin Yi, who had the jade pendant space to continuously replenish his spirit qi, rejuvenation was not that valuable. It could only be considered a good backup trump card. Of course, it still had great research value. You want to learn rejuvenation? Duan Muyu looked at Lin Yi seriously, pondered for a moment, and shook her head. This is the trump card of our Yi Ling sect, and we can't teach it to outsiders casually. Moreover, the aptitude requirement to master this move is very unique. Even among the Yi Ling sect's disciples, there aren't many who can master it. Oh, forget it then. It was just a whim. Goodbye. As he spoke, Lin Yi left, leaving only a silhouette in the distance. This Lin Yi is really a guy who can't be seen through. Duan Muyu said thoughtfully. Although the battle between Cooled and Duan Muyu had dragged out a lot of time, there were very few battles in the 5th round to begin with. Basically, there were only 2 or 3 battles in each group, and most of them ended very quickly. Among them, it was worth mentioning that there was a familiar face to Lin Yi in the mid-stage Foundation Establishment Group, Fei Yangsheng. Chapter 5210. The tournament continued, and soon, it was Ziyu's turn. Letting Lung escape was already embarrassing enough for Shui Jianfeng, and naturally, he had to use this chance to mess with Ziyu. Unfortunately, Ziyu wasn't the same as before, and with a set of instant attacks, she took the opponent's life cleanly. The opponent didn't even have a chance to fight back, and as for Xue Jianfeng's warning, that was pure nonsense. At this point, Lin Yi's group had all obtained the qualifications to participate in the Archaean trials. As for Xue Jianfeng, who had vowed to make Lin Yi feel the pain of his heart's pain, not only did he get nothing out of it, but he almost lost against Lung Lung. He was a golden core early stage, and he almost got dragged down by a foundation establishment perfection. That was a huge loss of face. Mph, I'll let you guys live a little longer. Don't even think about living after the Archaean trials. Looking at the cheering Lin Yi's group, Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth. He didn't wait for the tournament to end before turning around and leaving with a dark face. He wasn't in a hurry to go back to sulk, but to apologize to the center. The tournament was already over. He had boasted in front of the glasses doctor before, and now he hadn't done anything at all. This wasn't just a problem of making a fool of himself. If the glasses doctor thought that he wasn't useful enough and cancelled his priority training, he'd really be coughing up blood. You're finally here. The glasses doctor said in a low voice, a little unhappy. That training competition is the highlight of this period of time, and my every move is being watched. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, it's not convenient for me to leave as I please. Please forgive me. Xue Jianfeng hurriedly tried to remedy the situation. Is that so? But why did we hear that not only did you leave in the middle of it, but you even left for a few days? Dafeng Bro curled his lips. This. Xue Jianfeng suddenly choked. Only then did he realize that someone else must have reported to him. After all, with so many people secretly relying on the center, it would be easy for the bespectacled doctor and brother Dafeng to grasp the situation of the trial. What? Do you still want to continue covering up the fact that you were beaten up by Lung Lung? Are you trying to keep us in the dark? Big brother Feng coldly snorted as he asked. He did not know about Lin Yi's plan to instigate defection. He was merely unhappy with Xue Jianfeng, the traitor. Not only that, the training competition was such a good opportunity, but you didn't do anything at all. Instead, Lin Yi and the others advanced smoothly one by one. How do you explain this? The bespectacled doctor was also extremely dissatisfied. To think that he had listed Xue Jianfeng as a person to focus on nurturing. He didn't expect that this guy would actually be so useless. Now, even he felt that he had lost all face. Xue Jianfeng didn't dare to quibble. He admitted his mistake on the spot without the slightest hesitation, and his attitude was rather sincere. Please calm your anger, sirs. I did not do my job well and have disappointed you. I deserve death. His attitude stunned Big Brother Feng. In order to confuse him and make him think that he was still trusted, the bespectacled doctor had revealed to him the matter of focusing on nurturing. Big Brother Feng wanted to take this opportunity to trample on Xue Jianfeng. Even if he was to focus on nurturing, he had to find someone more pleasing to the eye. However, Xue Jianfeng's attitude made him unsure of how to kick him when he was down. All right, I'll give you a chance to explain. The bespectacled doctor nodded. Although he was also very disappointed with Xue Jianfeng's incompetence, the name list had already been submitted. He did not want to go back on his word unless it was absolutely necessary. What's more, Xue Jianfeng's background in the Snowsword faction was indeed very useful to the center. It was because of this that they treated him differently. Yes, thank you, sirs. Xue Jianfeng felt as if he had been pardoned. The bespectacled doctor's attitude meant that as long as he could give a good reason, he would be able to get away with it. He quickly said, "It's not that I didn't put in the effort in this tournament, but I did everything I could." Threats and promises were used, and the Archaic Alliance disciples who fought with Lin Yi also promised to go all out, but the result was that everyone was completely suppressed from start to finish. There was really no other way. Continue. The bespectacled doctor didn't say anything. Dafeng Bro, naturally, didn't say anything. Yes, this kind of suppression wasn't just on the surface. It was a direct suppression of the life gate. I don't know how Lin Yi did it, but to be suppressed like this in a fight of the same level, it'd be hard for him not to lose. Xue Jianfeng said respectfully. If that's the case, Then I can't blame it on you. The bespectacled doctor nodded. Shui Jianfeng couldn't fight Lingshan's group himself, after all. The most he could do was let the others use the opportunity to kill him. Failure was something he couldn't do anything about. But you're an early phase golden core, and not only did you fail to kill Lunglung, you even almost lost to her. You can't deny this, can you? Dafeng Bro frowned. This. Shui Jianfeng's face turned red, and he could only say, this subordinate was indeed careless and underestimated the enemy. I didn't expect that the painted ground imprisonment created by her shattered ice physique would be so powerful, so I suffered a loss. However, this subordinate guarantees that I won't fail next time. Next time? Dafeng Bro snorted. An early phase golden core couldn't even handle a foundation establishment full circle, and he still had the face to mention next time? Alright, let bygones be bygones. Since we failed this time, we need to think of a way to make up for it. Do you understand me? The bespectacled doctor interrupted. Thank you for your trust. I can't thank you enough. Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed and quickly said, after the competition ends, the next 2 months will be a collective rest period. Everyone will go into closed-door training. I think Lin Yi's group won't be an exception, so it'll be hard to find a suitable opportunity before the Primeval trials. We can only wait for the Primeval trials. If that's the case, then we'll wait for the Primeval trials. The bespectacled doctor decided. This was something he and Shui Jianfeng had decided on their own. It wasn't an order from the higher-ups. It would be fine if there was a suitable opportunity, but since there wasn't one, there was no need to force it. Yes. Shui Jianfeng nodded. He couldn't help but ask, then when will the training start? If we wait until the Primeval trials, it won't be convenient. Chapter 52:11. That's great. Thank you for the training. Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed. He thought he was done for after making such a fool of himself. He didn't expect the bespectacled doctor to think so highly of him. As long as he could get the opportunity to focus on training, his strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds again. By then, even Bing Wuqing would be under his feet. This was his dream. Big Brother Dafeng couldn't help but feel a little helpless, but since the bespectacled doctor had said so, he couldn't say much. He was nominally the leader of this operation, but to put it bluntly, he was just a puppet in name. What troubled him the most now was how to deliver the information to Lin Yi. Otherwise, if he waited for Shui Jianfeng's strength to increase greatly and waited for an opportunity to strike in the Primeval trial, even Lin Yi would suffer a great deal if he was caught off guard. However, if there were no special circumstances, he could only act with the bespectacled doctor. Even if he could move freely, it would not be easy to avoid the Primeval Alliance's disciples and contact Lin Yi. After all, there was no cell phone signal here, so he couldn't make a call even if he wanted to. He was at his wits' end. Fortunately, Big Brother Dafeng didn't have a headache for too long. It wasn't because he had the opportunity to go out alone, but because Lin Yi came to look for him. He was about to go to the Primeval trial, and he didn't know how long it would take. Lin Yi naturally had to find a way to inform him. Although Big Brother Dafeng couldn't be too far away from the bespectacled doctor, there was still some free space, such as taking a dump. Of course, Big Brother Dafeng didn't know that Lin Yi would take the initiative to look for him. He was really taking a dump when Lin Yi's voice suddenly came from above his head. Dafeng, how have you been, fuck? Big Brother Dafeng was shocked. When he looked up, he didn't see anything. He couldn't help but say suspiciously, no way? Is it because I've been cooped up in this damn place for too long that I'm having auditory hallucinations? Will I become mentally ill? Do you want me to take you to the mental hospital? Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. As he spoke, he condensed a physical spirit in front of Big Brother Dafeng. Boss, is it really you? Big Brother Feng was surprised and overjoyed. He immediately reacted and lowered his voice, grumbling, Boss, why are you so elusive? You scared the shit out of me. Lin Yi was speechless. Seeing that this guy was about to get close to him without even pulling up his pants, he quickly jumped back in fright. He pinched his nose and frowned. Can you please wipe your butt first? Oh. Big Brother Feng picked up a few leaves from the side and rubbed them symbolically. Then, he pulled up his pants without a care in the world. However, Lin Yi's eyelids kept twitching. Fortunately, he wasn't a clean freak. Otherwise, he would have collapsed at the sight of this scene. However, out of psychological effects, he subconsciously took 2 steps back and maintained a safe distance. Let's talk this out. Just stand there. Ooh. Big Brother Feng's expression was very sad, but the other party's disgust was already written on his face. He was too embarrassed to continue to get close to him, so he quickly threw away the leaves in his hand and said embarrassedly, "Boss, how did you find me? I knew when you came in. I saw your every move. It's just that I wasn't proficient in the spirit state at that time, so I didn't dare to come down and meet you." Lin Yi smiled. Spirit state. Big Brother Feng was confused. Lin Yi didn't explain these things to him in detail. Of course, he couldn't understand at his level, but he didn't need to understand too much. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It's good that you know. I was afraid that you would be kept in the dark and be tricked by these guys. Sure enough, my worries were unnecessary. Boss is the boss. It's all thanks to you keeping an eye on me. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even know they sneaked in. The consequences would be unimaginable. Lin Yi sighed. During this time, Big Brother Feng didn't seem to play any role, but in fact, his existence itself was very valuable. Even if Lin Yi had rebelled against Bing Wuqing and the other Archaic Alliance masters, Big Brother Feng's position was still unique. Hihi, no matter what, it's fine as long as I can help boss. Big Brother Feng smiled carelessly and said, by the way, recently, Dr. Glasses and the others are doing some kind of focus training program. I wonder if boss has noticed. Focus training program? Lin Yi was taken aback. He had been busy training everyone to deal with the trial. He didn't have time to monitor every move here, so he really didn't know anything about it. He quickly said, "Tell me in detail." "I don't know the specific plan. It was proposed by the bespectacled doctor directly to the higher-ups. I didn't do it myself. I just heard him mention it casually. However, one thing is for sure. The target for training this time is Xue Jianfeng," Brother Dafeng said in detail. Xue Jianfeng? How can it be him? Shouldn't Bing Wuqing be valued more? Lin Yi frowned. Since it was a focused training program, it meant that the center would definitely invest a lot of resources into it. It would be great if it was Bing Wuqing, who was one of them. It would be equivalent to the center working for him for nothing. He didn't expect them to choose Xue Jianfeng. From what Dr. Glasses said, it's probably because of Xue Jianfeng's background in the Snowsword faction. It would be convenient for the center to do anything in the Archaic Alliance in the future. Big Brother Feng frowned. The higher-ups of the center did not intend to tell him these things clearly, but intentionally or unintentionally revealed them to him through Dr. Glasses' mouth. They did not trust him as an outsider, which made him feel a little unnatural, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong at the moment. Sure enough, the center will not let go of this fat piece of archaic underworld. Lin Yi shook his head and laughed. There was no need to think about this at all. The center would definitely copy what they did on Heaven Stage Island to archaic underworld. Although this expansion method of the Chamber of Commerce was not very clever, it was indeed successful. Apart from this, there are no other movements recently. The instigating and controlling of the Archaic Alliance's disciples has basically stopped. If we want to go further, we will have to wait for instructions from the higher-ups, Big Brother Feng said. Okay, I got it. Lin Yi nodded and instructed, I'm going to bring some people to participate in the archaic trials. You stay put and hide. Remember, safety first. Unless I tell you to move, you can't move on your own. Don't raise suspicions. Boss, don't worry. I understand, Big Brother Feng promised. Chapter 52:12. Boss is the boss. His methods are so fucking unpredictable, Brother Dafeng praised. Suddenly, Lin Yi's voice came from above. There's something I forgot to tell you. Please tell me, boss. Brother Dafeng immediately stood at attention, looking like he would go through fire and water without hesitation. You stepped on shit. Lin Yi's tone was very complicated. If it wasn't for this, he might be willing to stay a little longer. But now, he really couldn't stand it anymore. Fuck. Who the fuck peed and pooped everywhere? Do you have any morals? Brother Darfeng suddenly cursed. Even the bespectacled doctor in the distance heard the commotion and looked puzzled. Lin Yi ran away in embarrassment, and at the same time, he said, "That seems to be your own." After leaving, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the island exclusive to the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island. Instead, he went to the territory of the Snowsword School and found Bing Wuqing after carefully avoiding everyone's eyes and ears. Bing Wuqing was shocked when she heard Lin Yi's primordial spirit voice transmission. She was in the late Golden Elixir realm and had her signature ruthless ice aura, but she didn't notice it at all. She couldn't help but be secretly afraid. Although Lin Yi was only in the great completion of Foundation establishment, his methods were really unfathomable. Lin Yi didn't show up on the spot. After all, Shui Jianfeng wasn't far away. After the primordial spirit voice transmission, he waited in another secluded place on the island. Bing Wuqing immediately understood. She stood up and walked toward a secluded place. However, when she turned around, she ran into Shui Jianfeng. This guy looked very suspicious. "Where are you going, senior brother Bing? Why do I need to report to you about what I'm doing?" Bing Wuqing glanced at him. He was such a person. Besides, there was a huge gap between their strength. Of course, he didn't need to care about Shui Jianfeng's feelings. "That's not it. It's just that the two of us work together. Senior brother Bing, you can let me know in advance if you need anything. Maybe I can help," Shui Jianfeng said shamelessly. It wasn't because of anything else. He was purely afraid that Bing Wuqing would go to the bespectacled doctor for special training like him. Wouldn't it be a big loss if she took his priority training spot? Bing Wuqing frowned and said, "I'm going in seclusion." Seclusion? Shui Jianfeng was still skeptical until he confirmed that Bing Wuqing wasn't heading in the direction of the bespectacled professor. Only then did he feel relieved. He was secretly pleased with himself. "Go ahead and cultivate in seclusion. When you're done and come out, I'll see if you still have the guts to put on that dead face of yours." After making sure that Shui Jianfeng had not followed her secretly, Bing Wuqing then went to look for Lin Yi. She bowed respectfully and asked, "May I know what instructions the higher-ups have for me?" "It's nothing. I just found out that the center is going to focus on nurturing Shui Jianfeng. So, I'm just informing you," Lin Yi said indifferently. "There's such a thing." Bing Wuqing was startled when she heard that. When she thought of Shui Jianfeng's strange behavior just now, she suddenly realized that this brat was trying to get special treatment behind her back. A wave of anger rose in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She said in a low voice, "Your subordinate is slow and didn't realize it in time. Please punish me." "Punish?" Lin Yi laughed when he heard that. He casually threw 2 elixirs to her and said playfully, "All right then. Take these 2 poisonous pills as punishment and kill yourself as an apology." This. Bing Wuqing's expression changed. She struggled and hesitated for a moment, but then she took the elixirs and stuffed them into her mouth. She had no intention of resisting at all. Of course, she knew that resistance was futile. After all, she still had Lin Dongfang's GU in her body. If she dared to resist, she would definitely die a horrible death. Lin Yi was a little stunned when he saw that. Bing Wuqing's action couldn't be said to be very loyal, but at least it showed that she was very adaptable. It was easy to deal with people like her, as long as she always maintained an advantage in terms of strength. At the last moment, Lin Yi finally stopped Bing Wuqing. He laughed and said, "Why don't you take a look at what these elixirs are? How dare you stuff them into your mouth like that?" Bing Wuqing was shocked when she heard that. Only then did she take a closer look at the 2 elixirs in her hand. When she came back to her senses, she was instantly stunned. She cried out in shock, "Supreme grade gold cores? If you really eat both of them together, let's not talk about whether you can take it or not. Even if you can, you'll definitely regret it to death," Lin Yi said, amused. "Ah, I forgot myself." Bing Wuqing was a little embarrassed, which was rare for her. Just as Lin Yi had said, if she really ate these 2 supreme-grade gold cores together, she would definitely regret it to death. She could have broken through to gold core perfected, but if she ate them together, she might only be able to reach the peak of gold core late stage. "It's nothing. If even your behavior is considered to have forgotten yourself, I reckon no one in the world can keep their composure. Lin Yi shook his head. Bing Wuqing's actions just now had truly given him a fright. Although he couldn't completely rule out the possibility that she was acting, that kind of reaction wasn't something an ordinary person could pull off. He had to admit that she was indeed a talent. Thank you so much for your guidance. Bing Wuqing clenched the 2 supreme-grade gold cores tightly, her eyes shining with excitement. She couldn't help but feel excited. These 2 elixirs were almost equivalent to guaranteeing her a 2-level upgrade in an extremely short period of time. It was a good thing that she couldn't even dream of. Since you're my subordinate, I naturally have to give you some benefits. Otherwise, if even trash like Shui Jianfeng rides over your head, wouldn't it be very embarrassing for me? Lin Yi said with a smile. Rest assured, I will definitely keep a close eye on Shui Jianfeng and not let him get out of control. Bing Wuqing understood tacitly. Very well. In that case, you should go into seclusion. I'll take my leave first. As he spoke, Lin Yi transformed into the form of a primordial spirit and disappeared. Bing Wuqing stayed where she was for a moment. No one knew what she was thinking about. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in her eyes, and she immediately sat down cross-legged to adjust her condition. There was still 1.5 months before the start of the Primeval trials. If she wanted to completely digest the medicinal effects of these 2 supreme-grade gold cores, she had to make the best use of her time. At the same time, Shui Jianfeng, who was on the other side, inexplicably shuddered. Then, he went to look for the bespectacled doctor. The long-awaited intensive training was finally about to begin. Chapter 52:13. Even with Lin Yi's protection, Lin Yi couldn't guarantee everyone's safety. After all, Shui Jianfeng, who'd gone through intensive training, was a completely different person. He was a threat that couldn't be underestimated. And so, in the last month and a half, Lingshan and the others went into closed-door training. With the supreme-grade foundation and foundation-breaking pills that Lin Yi had prepared for them, even if they couldn't level up, they could at least solidify their strength and protect themselves. As for Lin Yi, it was a bit troublesome for himself. Other than trying to figure out the tricks and uses of the half-primordial spirit, it seemed like breaking through to foundation full mastery was as hard as reaching the heavens. He didn't know why, but no matter how hard he tried, he was always lacking something. If it was someone else, they might think that they were just a thin line away from success, and would try everything they could, but Lin Yi himself was a mystic early-phase practitioner, after all. He had a lot of experience when it came to things like breakthroughs, and he knew that he was missing something. Forcing it would only backfire. But the problem was, what was missing? Or was it that the limit of the primordial spirit was foundation full mastery? He didn't know, but the former was more or less possible, but if it was the latter, then there was nothing he could do. Even Lin Yi couldn't do anything about it. Lin Yi felt helpless. Although the half-primordial spirit state was a great trump card, it wasn't a long-term plan. Even someone like Shui Jianfeng was a golden core practitioner now, and he'd be even stronger in the primordial trials. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was stuck at foundation full mastery, and he couldn't make any progress. Lin Yi really didn't have the strength to do what he wanted. 1.5 months later, everyone was gathered by Xin Yijie again, but they were divided into 2 groups. One of them was eager to try, because they were about to start the primordial trials that only happened once in 1,000 years. The other group was depressed, because they were the losers of the primordial trials. No matter how rare the primordial trials was, it had nothing to do with them anymore. Everyone, the year-long training in the mortal world has officially come to an end today. Although many things happened in the process, it's finally over. Congratulations, Xin Yijie said loudly and nodded to Lin Yi gratefully. That's right, Lin Yi. If it wasn't for Lin Yi, the Grand Master, who turned the tide, it was hard to say what would have happened between the Primordial Alliance and the Cultivators' Alliance in the secular world. Perhaps the secular world would have been plunged into misery and suffering, and the Primordial Alliance would have lost a bunch of disciples. The situation would be out of control, and Xin Yijie, as the Grand Master who led the team, would have to bear the blame. The others didn't comment on this. For most of the Primordial Alliance's disciples, the secular world experimental trials was just a recreational activity. Apart from seeing the colorful world of the secular world, they didn't expect to gain any substantial gains. In fact, most of them went out for a walk at the beginning, and after that, they stayed in the transit islands to cultivate. Instead of saying that they came out for the secular world experimental trials, it was better to say that they came out for closed-door training. Since the secular world experimental trials has ended, according to the order of the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups, everyone should go back to their respective places. Shin Ijie paused and announced, "First of all, the disciples who were eliminated in the grand competition will be teleported back to the primordial underworld and report back to your respective sects. No one is allowed to stay here." Everyone had expected this result. Although they were reluctant to leave the transit islands for the unique spiritual chi, it was an order from the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups. They didn't have the guts to defy it, so they could only agree in unison. Under Shin Ijie's supervision, everyone entered the teleportation formation. With a flash of white light, they disappeared in the teleportation formation. After that, Shin Ijie turned to Lin Yi and the others and said, "As for the rest of you, you are the elites who have passed the grand competition and successfully obtained the qualifications to participate in the trial. The place you will be going next is naturally the legendary primordial trial. Marshal Uncle Shin, where is this primordial trial that you mentioned?" Someone asked impatiently. "Yeah, you made us dig for so long in the underwater spirit jade mine, saying that it's to prepare for the primordial trial, but I don't see a third teleportation formation." The others followed. 2 teleportation formations, one was connected to the secular world and the other to the primordial underworld. Where was the third one? There is, but it hasn't appeared yet. Shin Ijie pretended to be profound and smiled. It hasn't appeared yet? Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. Could it be that the teleportation formation could be hidden? Everyone, calm down. According to the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups, the teleportation formation will appear today. Just wait patiently, Shin Ijie said and sat down. Lin Yi smiled faintly and sat down as well. The others looked at each other. Although their hearts were itching like a cat scratching them, since Shin Ijie wanted to keep them in suspense, there was nothing they could do. They could only sit down and wait. At this time, Duan Muyu suddenly walked over and sat down beside Lin Yi under everyone's surprised gaze. Under normal circumstances, when a woman sat next to a man, she would be embarrassed and blushed. However, her expression was calm and composed, without the slightest bit of embarrassment. On the contrary, she was more elegant and calm than most men. "Brother Lin, thank you for your help last time." Duan Muyu cupped her hands. "You're welcome. It's nothing." Lin Yi smiled faintly and shook his head. "It might be nothing to you, but it's no small matter to me. If it wasn't for Brother Lin, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to participate in the primordial trials and would have to return home like the others," Duan Muyu said seriously. He wasn't just saying that out of politeness. If it weren't for Lin Yi treating her frostbite, just the frostbite from the shattered ice prison mirror would have given her a headache for a few months. Let alone participating in the Archean trials, she might still be busy treating her wounds right now. "So, Miss Duan Muyu has fully recovered?" Lin Yi asked curiously. The week period of rejuvenation withered leaves was 3 months. Although Duan Muyu used an incomplete version, it had only been 1.5 months. It was still unknown whether she had fully recovered. Maybe this woman was taking the risk to participate in the primordial trials. "You can say that." Duan Muyu's answer was ambiguous. After all, they were not familiar with each other. If she casually told Lin Yi, it would be too immature. Chapter 52:14. They chatted to kill time as they waited for the moment Shin Ijie was talking about. They waited for an entire day, and nothing happened even when the sky turned dark. There wasn't even a shadow of the so-called third portal. "Uncle Shin, where is this third portal you're talking about? Is it just a legend?" The people couldn't help but wonder. That. Shin Ijie was a bit troubled himself, but this third portal was something recorded in the archaic pugilistic world. It definitely wasn't a legend. But, could it be that the Archaic Alliance had miscalculated the date of the portal's appearance? That was hard to say. Shin Ijie's reaction made the group even more suspicious. They'd been looking forward to this once-in-a-thousand-years trial for a whole year, and they'd even given it their all to pass the toughest test in history, but now they couldn't even see the shadow of the third portal. If this was just a legend, how could they take it? Just when everyone was thinking about it, Ziyu suddenly said, "The moon tonight is so round and so close." Everyone was taken aback when they heard that. They looked up and started to discuss among themselves. For some reason, the moon tonight was indeed very round and close to them. If it was just round, it would be fine. After all, the moon was waxing and waning. Even if this was a transit point, there was nothing strange about it. However, the moon tonight was ridiculously close. It felt like they could touch it if they stretched out their hands. It was almost pressing down on everyone's face. This was something that no one had ever seen before. "Look, the tide's receding so fast," someone shouted. Everyone looked over, and the tide was indeed receding fast. In just an instant, the water level dropped by a huge chunk, and there were no signs of it slowing down at all. The tide was receding faster and faster, and in the end, it sounded like it was going to destroy the world. It was truly shocking. It's actually connected. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. This was originally a transit island, but after the unprecedented turbulent ebb tide, the shallow sea that originally separated the islands had all turned into land, and they were all connected. Chem, isn't that the spirit jade mine under the sea? It's much easier to mine now. We don't have to come up for air every once in a while, and it's so slow. If we go mining now, we can probably get 3 pieces a day, the group discussed. However, Shin Ijie ignored the crowd's discussion. Instead, he walked toward the new land that appeared out of nowhere with a complicated and abstruse drawing in his hand. Everyone didn't know what was going on, so they stood up and followed him. They couldn't help but ask, "Marshal Uncle Shin, is there any mystery in this?" "The secret is right here." Shin Ijie suddenly stopped and pointed at the round black stone he was stepping on. The group walked up and looked at it. Other than being a bit harder, there didn't seem to be anything special about it. They looked at each other. What's so special about it? Shin Ijie smiled mysteriously without saying a word. After comparing it with his abstruse drawing, he turned around and walked to another place. Soon, he found another piece of black stone, which was exactly the same as the previous one. Then, he found the third, the fourth, the fifth. In the end, he found a total of 72 identical black stones in a large area around him. Furthermore, they seemed to have formed an inexplicable and mysterious spell formation. "What are these?" The group was confused. "Black stone plum blossom formation." Shin Ijie smiled while stroking his beard. "Black stone plum blossom formation? What is this thing? Is it also a type of teleportation array?" Everyone was confused by what they saw. "No, but we'll see the third teleportation formation soon. Come, everyone, help me. Put 3 pieces of spiritual jade on each black stone," Shin Ijie said. A moment later, 3 pieces of spiritual jade were placed on each of the 72 black stones according to Shin Ijie's instruction. At first, there was no movement, but soon, they began to glow. Then, an invisible gust of wind rose into the sky, sweeping away all the sand in an instant. The entire ground sank by 7 to 8 meters. The group was shocked. The black stones they saw earlier were just a small part of it. It turned out that there were 72 black stone pillars, and there was an ancient teleportation formation among them. The third teleportation formation. The group was overjoyed. One of them said regretfully, "If we knew we could find the teleportation formation by removing the sand, we wouldn't have wasted so many spiritual jades. We could have saved them with just a little effort." It was not difficult for them to remove the sand, but more than 200 spiritual jades were a huge sum in the ancient underworld. Many of them had never seen so many spiritual jades in their lives. "You're overthinking. The black stone plum blossom formation is an ancient maze. If you don't activate it with spiritual jades, you won't be able to find the teleportation formation even if you clean up all the sand." Shin Ijie shook his head. "Since we've found the teleportation formation, let's start the teleportation." Shui Jianfeng suddenly stood up and said. Ever since he came back from the center's intensive training, his temperament had changed a lot. He became more reserved and deep. He no longer had the arrogant attitude he used to have. Instead, he was more like a venomous snake that kept spitting out its tongue as if it was going to devour someone at any time. Hearing his words, the group who were still immersed in shock immediately came to their senses. They became impatient and wanted to be the first to rush into the teleportation formation. All right, then everyone enter in order. There's no need to hurry. There are only 43 people in total. With the scale of this ancient teleportation formation, it's enough to teleport everyone in one go. Shin Ijie immediately led the group into the teleportation formation one by one. 43. This was the total number of people participating in the archaic trials, and this was also because of Lin Yi's group. Otherwise, the number of people would be even lower. People valued quality over quantity. This was the unified thinking of the Archaic Alliance. They didn't need to let every disciple of the Archaic Alliance get the opportunity. They just needed to make sure that the most deserving disciples didn't miss it. Chapter 52:15. So you're saying that the Spirit River might be fake? Someone asked. I don't think so. After all, almost all the ancient books related to this trial ground have mentioned about the River of Consciousness. However, it's hard to tell what exactly the River of Consciousness is. You can only explore it with your own eyes. Maybe it's really a legendary river of consciousness, or maybe it's a dangerous river of consciousness. Everyone, just be careful. Shin Ijie said. The group looked at each other. The thing they were looking forward to the most was the legendary Spirit River. Shin Ijie's words were like pouring a bucket of cold water on their heads. No matter what, take care of yourselves. Anyway, take care of yourselves. I'll stay here for a month after you're teleported over. If anything happens to you, you can always find a way to teleport back here. However, if you wait for a month, the tide will rise again. By then, you'll have to find another one-way teleportation formation to return to the primordial underworld. As for the map of the one-way teleportation formation, each of you will have a copy. However, it might be different from the actual map, Shin Ijie reminded. In other words, within a month, everyone still had the chance to back out if the situation was bad. After all, this training ground was only opened once every 1,000 years, and no one knew how it was now. If they were to directly cut off everyone's path of retreat with danger everywhere, causing all the genius disciples to be annihilated, then that would be a huge joke. However, after a month, he wouldn't even have the chance to change his mind. No matter how dangerous the situation would be, he would have to brace himself and find another one-way teleportation array. Otherwise, he would be trapped in the trial grounds waiting for death. Shin Ijie started arranging large amounts of spirit jade to activate the portal. Lin Yi, Ling Shan, and the others looked at each other. According to Shin Ijie, it wouldn't be easy for them to come back from the ancient Jianghu. If they couldn't come back through the portal, they would have to go back to the ancient Jianghu. The time it would take would be unimaginable. It might take years or even decades. Fortunately, they were mentally prepared for this. They had told their friends and family beforehand, so they could take care of each other. It wouldn't be a big deal even if it took a long time. Everything was ready. The portal was finally activated. A white light flashed, and the scene in front of Lin Yi and the others changed. Why is it so dark? The group thought that their eyes weren't used to it yet, but it was still pitch black after a while. They started complaining. Even if it was pitch black, there shouldn't be no light at all. Don't panic, it's a cave. Lin Yi comforted them and reminded Lingshan and the others, you can use your spirit sense if you can't see with your eyes. This is something you need to get used to. After reaching a certain level, basically everyone would use their divine sense as their primary means of perception. If they really relied on their eyes, it would be very difficult to even keep up with their opponent's movement technique, let alone fight against them. It really is a cave, and it's very narrow and deep. Lung Lung nodded. She was the second strongest person in the group, and was also a foundation perfection practitioner. Naturally, her reactions were faster than Lingshan and the others. The others also reacted, using their divine senses to sense the surrounding environment. Although there was no visual effect of color, their perception of shapes and silhouettes was more detailed and distinct. Why would the ancients put the portal in such a deep cave? It's scary. The group was speechless. No matter what, let's get out of here first. After saying that, someone took the lead and walked towards the entrance of the cave. The others didn't have any intention of staying here and followed suit one after another. Only Lin Yi stayed and studied the portal underfoot. The structure of this portal was exactly the same as the one in the Transit Islands. In theory, it could be activated with enough spirit jade. But as Xin Yijie said, the place would be covered in seawater again a month later, and the black stone plum blossom formation would be activated again. It would be hard to say if the portal could still be used then. Right at this moment, a shrill and miserable howl suddenly rang out not far ahead. What followed was a flurry of panic. Everyone who had gone out earlier had actually all fled back, except for two people. One was Xue Jianfeng, and the other was Bing Wuqing. Everyone, be careful. Lin Yi gestured for the group to form a defensive formation. This was something they'd practiced for all sorts of dangers they might face in the primordial trials, but this formation was more than enough for defense, not enough for offense. It only made them a little safer. The group didn't dare tarry. Something that could scare so many elites of the Archaic Alliance this badly had to be a big threat. Sure enough, after the people at the front fled back, a group of fire-like existences also whistled and chased after them. Moreover, there were many of them, if not 10,000, there were at least 8,000. What's this? Ling Shan and the others were startled at the sight. These things were extremely fast, covering the skies in the blink of an eye. One of the Foundation Establishment Primeval disciples who was a bit slower got caught up and was dismembered into a pile of meat in an instant, his body still sizzling and smoking. It was a horrible sight to behold. Fire bats. Lin Yi blurted out. He'd seen these things in the Book of Omniscient on Sky Island before. They were extremely bloodthirsty spirit beasts, and while they weren't strong individually, at most at the early phase of Foundation establishment, they always moved in groups. Now that there were tens of thousands of them, the threat they posed wasn't something normal Foundation establishment practitioners could handle. The two Golden Core experts, Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng, were the strongest among them. If the two of them were willing to go all out, dealing with this flock of fire bats would not be a problem. Unfortunately, the two of them had no intention of doing so. Instead, they directly passed through the flock of fire bats and left, leaving only a group of Foundation establishment experts trapped here. The swarm of fire bats closed in. With the previous example right in front of their eyes, everyone didn't dare to have any thoughts of holding back their strength. They hastily used the martial skills they were most proficient in to counterattack. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, and the scene became extremely lively for a moment. However, the bats were too small, and they were extremely fast and agile. The group's messy attacks couldn't hit them, and they could only cover their heads and run. Chapter 52:16. Fire Bat King? What does the Fire Bat King look like? Everyone quickly shouted. The thousands of fire bats here looked almost the same. Even if they lined up one by one for them to look at, they probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, let alone in this situation. The strongest one is the Fire Bat King, Lin Yi said in a low voice. It was indeed difficult to tell from their appearance, but one thing was for sure. The Fire Bat King's strength must be above all the fire bats, or else it would not be able to control the entire flock of fire bats. That being said, it was not easy to find the strongest fire bat among the tens of thousands of fire bats. With the divine sense of these Foundation establishment stage experts, it was difficult to even lock onto the position of these rapidly moving fire bats, let alone carefully distinguish the strength of each fire bat. This was as difficult as ascending to heaven for everyone, but it was a piece of cake for Lin Yi. He found the Fire Bat King's tracks in an instant. Most of the other fire bats had strength comparable to the early stage of the Foundation establishment. The stronger ones were at most comparable to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment. However, this Fire Bat King, which looked exactly the same, had strength above the middle stage of the Foundation establishment. The speed of ordinary fire bats was already extremely fast, so fast that everyone could not react at all. However, this Fire Bat King's speed was several times faster. Although there was a residual flame arc wherever it passed, it could not be determined at all. Perhaps it was right in front of them a moment ago, but in the next moment, it was already hundreds of meters away. Even the flame arc it left behind could not catch up with such terrifying speed. It would be fine if that was all, but the key was that this fire bat king was very cautious. Every time it came in contact, it would retreat immediately. Usually, it would quickly hide back into the flock of fire bats after just one bite, making it impossible for anyone to chase after it. With Lin Yi's reminder, the others could not react in time, but 2 people had noticed the fire bat king's tracks. When it attacked again, the 2 of them attacked almost at the same time. They were cooled and Du and Muyu. In terms of strength, the 2 women were already top-notch among the Foundation establishment experts. It should have been a piece of cake for them to deal with this fire bat king. However, this time, the 2 women's attacks missed, and they almost hurt each other accidentally. Fortunately, they stopped in time. So fast. Lung Lung and Du and Muyu exclaimed at the same time. The fire bat king might not be considered powerful in other aspects, but its speed was truly invincible. Even the vital energy of its moves could not catch up to it. What could the crowd do to it? Fortunately, there was still Lin Yi. Before the fire bat king could escape back into the group of fire bats, a blue electric arc had already struck it. Lin Yi's other moves might not be able to do anything to it, but no matter how fast it was, how could it compare to the electric arc? With Lin Yi's current strength at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm, it was impossible for him to completely unleash his signature move. The 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura and thunder burial were both wishful thinking. Being able to barely use the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was already something he was secretly happy about. Other than that, he could just barely mobilize some of the power of thunder and lightning. However, there was no way he could use thunder burial. It was also impossible for him to use Thousand Thunder Explosion. An electric arc was not a threat to an expert of the same level. At most, it would numb the body for a moment. However, it was just right to deal with the Fire Bat King that was comparable to a mid-stage Foundation Establishment realm expert. As expected, after the Fire Bat King was hit by the electric arc, its body trembled and fell on the spot. Although it did not die immediately, it struggled on the ground and seemed to be able to fly. However, the crowd would not give it another chance. Lung Lung went up and struck the Fire Bat King with her palm, freezing it to death on the spot. This was called the Broken Ice Palm. Although it was not an ultimate move like the Painted Prison or the Ice Prison Mirror, it was still a unique palm technique that was fused with the Broken Ice Aura. It was Lung Lung's usual move against the enemy. As soon as the Fire Bat King died, the group of firebats was instantly thrown into chaos. After losing their leader, they instinctively scattered in all directions. Just a moment ago, they were everywhere, but in the blink of an eye, they were all gone. Phew! The group breathed heavily, their hearts filled with fear. At least 3 of them had died to the firebats, and the rest were injured. If it wasn't for Lin Yi finding the Fire Bat King and killing it, there would have been more of them dead. Most of them would have died here. This was indeed the Archean trials that happened once in 1,000 years. They had left a deep impression on the group. All right, let's go, Lin Yi said. Lingshan and the others nodded, but the other Archean Alliance disciples were scared out of their wits by the firebats. They all hid behind Lin Yi's group, so that if anything happened, the first to die would be Lin Yi's group, not them. A bunch of scum. Chen Tian curled his lips softly. If it weren't for Lin Yi, they'd be dead by now. Not only did he not say a word of thanks, but he was even hiding behind them with ulterior motives, using them as scapegoats. He was speechless. That's right, Lin Yi bro shouldn't have killed that Firebat King. We'll charge out ourselves and let them play with the firebats. Ziyu hemphed. Haha, then we're probably done for. If we're lucky, we might be able to teleport back, but if we're slow, we'll end up like those 3, a pile of meat on the ground. Yu Bing snickered. The others all grinned. The Archean Alliance disciples weren't happy with what they said, but they knew they were in the wrong. They didn't have the face to say anything, otherwise, Lin Yi would force them to walk in front. They didn't have the guts to do that. Not long later, the group finally walked out of the cave, and their eyes widened into a lush forest. Thank goodness, we're finally out. Everyone was overjoyed to see this. Although they knew that this training ground that only appeared once in 1,000 years would definitely be filled with dangers, and that there might be monsters that were even more ferocious and frightening than the flock of fire bats hidden within, this was human nature. There was always an innate fear towards this kind of dark and narrow cave. After experiencing the threat of the flock of fire bats, this fear had been magnified infinitely, causing them to not want to stay even a moment longer. Why are there 3 paths here? Someone called out suddenly. The group only reacted then, looking at each other. The map Shinijie gave them was very sketchy, and not only was there no markings for the fire bat's cave, there was only one path to exit the teleportation formation, but there were 3 paths in front of them, 3 stone paths that weren't too wide or too narrow. There were weeds everywhere, but the paths were clear. Chapter 52:17. Plus, even if that was the case, these 3 stone paths should have disappeared after 1,000 years of weathering. How could they still be here? They couldn't say that these stone paths were reinforced by some special formation, could they? It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't very likely. In comparison, Lin Yi was more inclined to believe that there were other people in this place. Perhaps there were natives here that few people knew about, or perhaps there were trial takers who teleported here from other places. Normal people wouldn't think of this, but for someone like Lin Yi who came back from Skystage Island, it made sense. After all, no one said that this teleportation formation was only connected to the transfer islands. Maybe it was connected to Skystage Island as well? But no matter what, since they were already here, they could only take it one step at a time. Right, where's Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng? Someone asked. The others all shook their heads. These 2 used their golden core stage strength to ignore the threat of the fire bats, rushing out early. They couldn't even be seen now. Do you even need to ask? They couldn't wait to go to the river of consciousness. They wouldn't stay here and wait for us, would they? Someone said. Not necessarily, this is a once in 1,000 years the river of consciousness. It's rare for us to come here, so we'd be idiots if we just went to the river of consciousness. We'd be missing out on a lot of good thing. Someone laughed. If that's the case, then why are we wasting time here? Let's go. The group couldn't wait to set off, but when they saw the 3 paths in front of them, they all paused and looked at each other before turning their attention to Lin Yi. What? You want me, Lin Yi bro, to open the path for you? You're too despicable. Ziyu said angrily. Everyone was a little embarrassed that their thoughts had been exposed. That was indeed what they were thinking. Other than Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng, the 2 golden core stage cultivators, Lin Yi was the strongest. Just like what had happened just now, in this Primeval trial ground where danger lurked everywhere, only by following Lin Yi closely would they be able to ensure their safety. Haha, you're wrong. I just wanted to see which path Brother Lin would choose. I don't want to pick the same path as me. Someone walked out from the crowd, smiling faintly. It was the young master of the Thousand Blades sect, Ling Tianyu. Me too. Duanmu Yu smiled faintly as well. Only then did everyone understand. No wonder the 2 of them had been silent all this while. It turned out that they had been planning this. Of course, if they could follow behind Lin Yi, it would be much safer. But at the same time, if they encountered anything good, it would be snatched away by Lin Yi's group. They wouldn't even be able to get a sip of the soup, let alone the meat. I see. Then I'll take my leave. Lin Yi nodded to the 2. These 2 were the people he looked up to the most in the Archaic Alliance. This was good, too. There would be less conflict if they each chose a path. It wasn't a bad thing. After exchanging greetings, Lin Yi led Lingshan and the others to the stone path on the left. None of the 3 paths were marked on the map. No one knew where they would go. He just picked one randomly. Seeing this, Ling Tianyu smiled and immediately chose another path to take the lead. Du and Muyu chose the 3rd path, leaving the rest of the people to look at each other in dismay and hesitation. Other than Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng, who were nowhere to be found, these 3 paths each had a leader. Of course, Lin Yi's group was the strongest. Not only did they have Lin Yi, they also had cooled, a peak-level foundation establishment perfection. Other than Lingshan and the others, while most of them were only at the early phase, with 2 or 3 at the early phase peak. None of them were easy to deal with, and most importantly, they were extremely united. The others couldn't compete with them at all. Other than that, Ling Tianyu and Duanmu Yu were about the same. The former was only late phase peak, but he was a genius with 1,000 blades. Other than a freak like Lin Yi, he was practically invincible. Duanmu Yu, on the other hand, was a little less famous, but his strength wasn't to be underestimated either. Compared to Lin Yi's group, they were obviously much weaker. Soon, everyone made their decision. Most of them chose Ling Tianyu and Duanmu Yu's paths, and only 3 people chose Lin Yi's path. Compared to the possibility of obtaining a fortuitous encounter, these people obviously cared more about their personal safety. They didn't have any extravagant hopes for the other fortuitous encounters in this ancient trial, except for the river of divine knowledge. Even if Lin Yi's group had a lot of people, and they could take all the treasures and fortunes in front of them, they couldn't possibly take the entire river of consciousness, could they? They didn't have a lot of people in the first place, and this split made them even weaker. But this didn't affect Lin Yi's group at all. As long as they supported each other, that was enough. They wouldn't be happy if all the other Archaic Alliance disciples followed them. Not only would they have to guard against all sorts of dangers and mishaps in the trials, but they would also have to guard against the traitors behind them. It was a headache just thinking about it, and it was much better to have peace and quiet like this. They walked peacefully for almost an hour, and gradually, even Lingshan and the others started to feel that something wasn't right. Lin Yi bro, why do I feel like this place is weird? Like something's watching us. Ziyu curled up as she observed the surroundings suspiciously. Everything was still a lush forest, but it didn't feel like that at all. She couldn't tell what exactly was wrong. Yeah, I feel like this place is weird too. Lingshan nodded. Yes, it is. Lung Lung said the same. Her spirit sense wasn't as strong as Lin Yi's, but it was much stronger than everyone else's. This feeling of something being off was even more obvious. Lin Yi looked at everyone and said in a low voice, "You're right, we're being watched by something, but we don't know what it is exactly yet. Be careful, we'll find out soon." Understood. Everyone nodded. Chapter 52:18. Fortunately, the 3 of them didn't have to be on edge for too long. A sharp whistle came from the sky and 3 black shadows rapidly approached. The 3 disciples of the Archaic Alliance didn't even have time to react before they were snatched away. The strongest among them was at the peak of mid-foundation establishment, but from start to finish, they didn't have the slightest ability to resist. They became prey through and through. What the hell is that? Chen Tian and the others jumped in shock. It was only now that they got a clear look at the 3 shadows. They were all slender birds, and while they weren't as big as the golden-eyed eagles Lin Yi had seen before, they weren't small either, standing at least 3 meters tall. It wouldn't have been a big deal if that was all, but the faces of these 3 birds were actually 3 human faces, male and female. They seemed to be able to communicate with each other, but the more it was like that, the more panicked they got. Lingshan and the other girls paled in fright, quickly hiding behind Lin Yi. Even Cooled, a foundation perfection like her, was no exception. This kind of fear had nothing to do with strength or weakness. The key was that the other party's bird-bodied appearance was far too bizarre. Especially to humans, it was probably more horrifying and terrifying than any hideous thing. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but take in a cold breath. Gomang. A bird's body and a human's face. This was something that only existed in ancient mythologies, and he didn't expect to see one in the archaic trials that only happened once every 1,000 years. This was unbelievable. This image seems to be Gomang. Could those ancient myths and legends be real? Chen Tian and the others were tongue-tied. They were all practitioners, and it was because of this that they knew that myths and legends were completely different from reality. But now, even Gomang had appeared. Was that still a myth? Who knows? Lin Yi was speechless. These 3 Gomang's appearance had a huge impact on everyone, and it was as if their worldview had been flipped upside down. In that short moment of silence, the 3 Gomangs had already devoured the corpses in their hands, but they still looked like they hadn't had enough. Their greedy eyes quickly landed on Lin Yi and the others, making their scalps go numb. Haha, looks like they're not full yet. Lin Yi laughed coldly. He was someone who'd been through a lot, after all, and Gomang's horrifying appearance only made him feel a little apprehensive. Once he calmed down, Gomang was no different from a normal spirit beast to him. He'd kill him when he needed to. Plus, these three Gomangs weren't that strong. They were much stronger than the fire bats at the beginning, but they were at the level of a Foundation establishment practitioner at most. They couldn't compare to the spirit beasts Lin Yi had seen on Skyclass Island at all. That may be the case, but judging from how effortlessly they killed a Foundation establishment peak mid-phase practitioner, each of these Gomang weren't weaker than a Foundation establishment practitioner at all. They were a lethal threat to Lingshan and the others. The three Gomangs tilted their heads and talked to each other. Everyone was confused, and Chen Tian couldn't help but ask, what language are they talking about? Of course, they're discussing who to eat first. Fatty Lai, you have more meat, so you'll be the first to get eaten. Ziyu plucked up the courage to tease him. She was scared quite a bit, but she'd always been brave. Other than looking a little scary, the three Gomangs weren't that scary. After all, Lin Yi was here. That's not necessarily true. I have more meat, but fat doesn't taste good. You girls, on the other hand, have soft skin and tender flesh. You should be more worried. Fatty Lai said with a smile. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile when he heard that. He'd been worried that the three Gomang would scare the hell out of them, and it'd be troublesome if something went wrong. But it seemed like he'd been worrying for nothing. Everyone's mental fortitude was much better than he'd expected. The three Gomang chattered for a long time before finally coming to an agreement. Suddenly, they charged into the sky as the group formed a defensive formation as though they were facing a formidable foe. However, the outcome was out of everyone's expectations. They just left without any intention of touching them. The group couldn't help but look at each other, relieved. It was hard to say what would happen if they really fought the three Gomangs. Only Lin Yi didn't let his guard down at all. He was still using his divine sense to scan the surroundings. After a while, his lips curled up. Playing this kind of game with us, going away and coming back. They're really smart. Going away and coming back. They're back. Everyone was alarmed when they heard that. Although they weren't as horrified as they were in the beginning, the three Gomang's oppressive and ferocious auras were real. It would be a lie to say that they weren't nervous. To them, these three were definitely ferocious creatures. They're not back. They never left. That was just a trick to confuse us. Lin Yi explained. His divine sense covered a wide range, and it would be strange if he couldn't even lock onto Gomang, who was only at the perfected level of Foundation establishment. So cunning. Everyone hurriedly maintained their defensive formation, guarding against the three Gomangs as though they were facing a formidable foe. Even a peak mid-stage Foundation establishment expert had become their food, much less their meager strength. If they did not form a defensive formation, they probably wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. After a while, two black shadows shot out from the forest, pincer attacking the group from the left and right. It was the two Gomangs they'd seen just now. Lung Lung, Lin Yi shouted as he faced the Gomang on his left. At the same time, Lung Lung faced the Gomang on his right in tacit understanding. Two fists couldn't fight four hands, and Lin Yi's strength was only at Foundation establishment perfection, after all. He could handle one, but two at the same time was a different story. He needed Lung Lung to take the brunt of the attack. Otherwise, if Lingshan and the others were to face Gomang's ambush head-on, the consequences would be dire even with the formation. Chapter 52:19. How is this possible? Lung Lung couldn't help but be shocked. The ice-shattering aura was the basis of all her strength. If even her ice-shattering aura couldn't be of any use, then it would be very difficult for her to deal with this monster. Its feathers are too thick. Lingshan and the others quickly reminded her from behind. Unless Gomang charged in, they wouldn't dare to attack recklessly. They could only use this method to help. Lung Lung only reacted now. The opponent's feathers were very thick, and the outermost layer was as hard as armor. Even if she was hit by the ice-shattering palm, the ice-shattering aura wouldn't be able to penetrate her body. Naturally, it wouldn't have any substantial effect. Since hitting the wings was useless, then she'd change to other areas, especially those with sparse feathers. For example, the opponent's creepy human face. Lung Lung made up her mind and immediately used her ice-shattering palm to greet the opponent's face. Surprisingly, Gomang didn't even try to block it. Instead, he wore a very human-like smile on his face. When Lung Lung's ice-shattering palm was about to land on his face, he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a green poisonous gas. Wherever the poisonous gas passed through, even the rocks were corroded into a bottomless hole. It was fortunate that Cooled Lung's reaction was fast enough to withdraw her hand in time. She managed to avoid the green poisonous gas by a hair's breadth. This thing is too cunning. Everyone was dumbfounded. Although they knew that many spirit beasts had extraordinary intelligence, they tended to be straightforward. There weren't many that liked to scheme, and there were even fewer like Gomang, who held back his strength to backstab others. Lung Lung was also shocked. After witnessing the strength of the opponent's poisonous gas, she immediately gave up on the idea of attacking the opponent's face. The opponent's face wasn't a weakness that could be exploited, but a trap that was meant to lure people into it. For a moment, Lung Lung was at a loss. Fortunately, she had the strength of a foundation establishment perfection. As long as she was careful, Gomang wouldn't be able to hurt her. However, Leng Leng had only exchanged a few blows with it when Gomang suddenly changed his strategy. After sweeping her away with a claw, he pounced towards Lingshan and the others. Fuck. Chen Tian and the others were startled. This guy had a human face after all. He knew how to pick on the weak. What a cunning bastard. Everyone, hold on, Lingshan shouted. While the others were shocked, they didn't panic. With her as the vanguard, they withstood Gomang's first attack. In terms of strength, Lingshan was second only to Lin Yi and Cooled. She'd broken through again after the tournament, and was now a foundation establishment practitioner at the peak. Even so, she couldn't withstand a single blow from someone like Gomang. She wasn't alone, however. Lin Yi had them practice a defensive formation that could withstand attacks far beyond what they could handle. Even a foundation establishment practitioner wouldn't be able to break through in a short amount of time, just like Gomang. Gomang didn't. He didn't expect that. Surprised. He. Lung he. That it Ji Lung it. Gomang it. At this moment, Lung had come up to them once again. The attack just now had really scared her out of her wits. Fortunately, Lingshan and the others had put up a good performance. Otherwise, she would have felt guilty for the rest of her life if someone had died from her sneak attack. Gomang repeated the same trick. He turned around and launched a claw attack. His legs were long and slender, and his claws were extremely sharp. When his speed reached a certain level, the threat he posed was no small matter. Even a perfected foundation establishment expert like Cooled would not dare to take it head-on. Moreover, Cooled had never been the type of person to fight head-on with brute force. But this time, Lung didn't choose to retreat. Instead, she gritted her teeth and blocked the attack with shattering ice palm. She didn't have a choice, she didn't dare to retreat anymore. Otherwise, she'd give the enemy a second chance to ambush Lingshan's group. Although the first time was a close shave, the second time might be different. Puff. Lung spat out a mouthful of blood abruptly. It was not a pleasant thing to use one's weakness to attack the enemy's strength. From the moment she realized it, it was inevitable for her to spit blood after getting injured. Ji Li Jiu Lu? Gomang paused, realizing that he couldn't retract his claw in time. Instead, Lung had a death grip on it, and as time went on, a bone-chilling coldness spread from his claw to the rest of his body. His entire body was showing signs of freezing. Great. Nice job, Lung sis. Ziyu was overjoyed and wanted to rush up to help. She wanted to let this scary thing have a taste of her instant attack. No. Cooled and the others were all shocked by this rash action of hers. Gomang was only affected by her ice aura. It wasn't enough to freeze him completely. With Ziyu's strength, it was suicide for her to charge at him. At this moment, Gomang turned around and spat out a green poisonous gas from its mouth. Cooled could muster the courage to take its claws head-on, but she did not dare to touch this thing. She quickly let go of its claws and dodged sideways. Just a little bit of this poisonous gas could kill a person. Ji Li Jiu Lu. Gomang's face flashed with savagery, and after forcing Lung back, he pounced at Lingshan's group once more. This time, his target was even more clear. It was Ziyu, who was standing a little too rashly. Ziyu, get back. Lingshan and the others panicked. Even if they were in a defensive formation and could share most of the pressure, they still needed someone to be the main pillar. This person could be Lingshan, Wu Chentian, or even Yu Bing, but it couldn't be anyone else. After all, only the three of them had broken through after the tournament, and the others, including Ziyu, were still at Foundation Establishment initial phase. They couldn't take on this responsibility at all. But Ziyu's position was too rash, and they could either push her out of the formation or force her to be the main pillar. Either way, Ziyu would be in extreme danger, especially since she was Gomang's first target. The results were unimaginable. Chapter 52:20. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Gomang looked as if his scheme had succeeded. His wings immediately swept over with a strong gust of wind. Even a perfected Foundation Establishment expert would not be able to withstand the might of his wings, much less an early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Ziyu was completely stunned, her mind blank as she watched the wings get closer and closer. A weird thought popped up in her head. Is this the feeling of death? What are you talking about? Lingshan's voice sounded in her head as she jumped out of the formation and stood in front of her without hesitation. How old are you? You want to die already? It's too early. Chentian appeared in front of her as well. Yeah. Yu Bing was the same. At this point, the only ones who could react in time were the three of them, who were at the peak of the early stage of Foundation Establishment. All of you. Ziyu felt her nose go sour. She knew very well that this was all her fault, and even if she died, it was her own fault. But now, Lingshan and the other two were standing behind her without hesitation. There was only one result to this: trading a life for a life, 3 lives for 1 life for hers. Without the formation, Lingshan and the other two wouldn't be able to survive Gomang's attacks even if they worked together. At the end of the day, they were only Foundation Establishment practitioners. Gomang saw this and changed his target from Ziyu to Lingshan and the other two. Everyone here was his prey, it was just changing the way he ate them. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful bone-chilling cold erupted from behind him, accompanied by a cold voice. Ice prison mirror, shatter. 1.5 months after the competition, she didn't do anything else. Even if she was already at Foundation perfection, even if she had the supreme golden core Lin Yi gave her, she didn't have the slightest intention of forcefully breaking through to the golden core stage. After all, she had just become a legend in the competition. Breaking through to the golden core stage would only deplete her reserves. Even if she succeeded, she'd just fade into the crowd. Leng Leng, naturally, wouldn't do something stupid like that, and so she only did one thing, that was to train her trump card, prison drawing. Of course, she also had an even stronger skill, ice prison mirror break. The ice prison mirror shattered. Even Duanmu Yu, who had unleashed his full strength back then, could not withstand it. Naturally, it was the same for the Gomang in front of him. He collapsed on the spot, becoming a human-faced, bird-bodied ice sculpture. Lingshan and the others looked at each other, their eyes filled with fear and relief. If Leng Leng didn't do it in time, they'd all become Gomang's food. On the other side, Lin Yi was facing Gomang alone. Unexpectedly, he wasn't able to kill it instantly. This Gomang was very cunning. It basically never attacked with its full strength. It would always move around to restrain Lin Yi, and its speed was extremely fast. Lin Yi couldn't finish it off with the 5 elements' murderous aura. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Cooled and the others fall into such a dangerous and bitter battle. This guy is a little troublesome. Lin Yi couldn't help but frown. Although this Gomang's strength wasn't at the level of Golden Core, it was definitely above most of the Foundation Establishment Perfection Masters. Of course, it wouldn't be a big deal if that was all. Lin Yi could handle it, but because he was worried about the third Gomang that hadn't appeared, he didn't dare to stray too far away from the others. Otherwise, he'd be in big trouble if he fell into the trap of luring the tiger away from the mountain. However, this would put him in a bind. The cunning Gomang only used all sorts of long-range attacks, but never a direct confrontation. Lin Yi couldn't even attack it, let alone kill it. When the 5 elemental killing aura was useless, Lin Yi's only move was electric arc. It wasn't hard to hit the Gomang with the speed of the electric arc, but the problem was that the opponent wasn't the Fire Bat King, but the Gomang that surpassed Foundation establishment perfection. The power of the electric arc could only tickle it, but it would be naive to think that it could kill it. Poof! That Gomang shot a green poisonous gas from afar. It didn't even bother to see if it was effective. After it was done, it turned around and retreated without any hesitation. What the hell? Lin Yi was helpless. Other than sending an electric arc to slightly numb it, there was nothing else he could do. Unless he unleashed his extreme butterfly microsteps to catch up to it. As long as he could close the distance between them to within 3 steps, the Gomang could forget about avoiding his 5 elemental killing aura. Unfortunately, he dared not take the risk because he knew that the third Gomang was waiting for an opportunity to strike. If Lung Lung was in perfect condition, it would be fine. As long as she could hold on for a bit, Lin Yi would be able to play along even if he knew that the Gomang was trying to lure him away. He had enough confidence that he could get back before anything happened to them, but Lung Lung had used up a lot of energy from using the ice prison mirror. She didn't even have the ability to protect herself. Ling Shan and the others helped Lung Lung sit down to recover as they looked at each other. They could see the predicament Lin Yi was in, but there was nothing they could do. After all, they didn't even have the strength to act tough. Otherwise, they'd end up like Ziyu and drag everyone else into danger. These Gomang are all crazy. Shouldn't they know when to retreat after suffering a loss? What's the point of them sticking to us like this? Chen Tian said helplessly. That's true, he looks like he's very smart. Why would a smart person do something like that? Yu Bing and the others were confused as well. Ling Shan thought about it and spoke up. They're trying so hard to keep us here, don't tell me they have reinforcements. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. He'd been keeping an eye on the third Gomang all this time and was only thinking of luring the tiger away from the mountain. He hadn't thought of this possibility. From the way the 3 Gomang moved in unison, it was obvious that they were existences that moved in groups. In that case, it was very likely that there was a 4th or 5th Gomang, or even more. Chapter 52-21. Ling Shan and the others nodded in unison, maintaining their defensive formation as they moved forward. Compared to staying in one spot, this was still a little risky, but compared to the possibility of them sitting on the ground and waiting for death, this risk was worth it. As soon as they started moving, the Gomang that had been clinging to Lin Yi all this while suddenly became a lot more intense. While it was still very careful to avoid a direct confrontation, it was clearly putting in more effort in its attacks, as if trying to stop the group from moving forward. Interesting. Lin Yi narrowed his eyes at the strange reaction. Boss, what did you find? Chen Tian asked. If I'm not wrong, this reaction proves 2 things, Lin Yi said thoughtfully. What 2 things? The others were confused. First, there's a high chance that they have reinforcements of the same species. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to keep bothering us. If they're the only 2 left, they should know that they can't do anything to us. Continuing wouldn't do them any good, and they might even get themselves killed, Lin Yi analyzed. This analysis was based on the premise that the Gomang had to have enough intelligence, or it wouldn't be possible if they were just driven by their animal instincts. Of course, from what they'd seen, the latter was very unlikely. Yes, it's very possible, the others nodded in agreement. Second, we need to be even more careful from now on. We might run into even greater danger ahead, something even more ferocious than these Gomangs, Lin Yi said solemnly. What do you mean? The others didn't understand. Think about it, if there aren't any other powerful beings ahead, do you think we'd be able to shake off the Gomang with our speed? Lin Yi asked. Impossible. The others shook their heads. They were walking on the ground, after all, and their speed wasn't fast at all. Gomang, on the other hand, was flying in the air. It was a piece of cake for it to keep an eye on them. If that's the case, why would they be so nervous? They could have gotten a Gomang to follow us unhurriedly and wait for their reinforcements to arrive before attacking. There's only one reason why it's trying so hard to hinder our advance. Once we advance a certain distance, we'll no longer be under their control, Lin Yi said indifferently. That means that if we go any further, we won't be in their territory anymore, but in the territory of another existence. Chen Tian realized. Yes, and that existence must be extremely strong, at least on par with these Gomang, maybe even stronger. Yu Bing nodded. Ooh. Lingshan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Doesn't that mean we've gone out of the wolf's den into the tiger's den? That is true. Trials are always like this. There are dangers everywhere. Everyone will slowly get used to it, comforted Lin Yi with a smile. But big brother Lin Yi, aren't you nervous at all? If it's something even stronger than these Gomang, wouldn't it be more dangerous for us to keep going? Ziyu couldn't help but ask. In theory, yes. Lin Yi nodded, but we have to go forward if we want to go to the river of consciousness. No matter how dangerous it is, we have to muster up our courage and go through it. We can't just give up halfway and become deserters, can we? I don't want to be a deserter. Ziyu shook her head, and the others had the same attitude. Since they'd decided to participate in this trial, they'd already prepared themselves to die. If they couldn't even handle this, how were they supposed to be able to hold their own in the future? How were they supposed to be Lin Yi's true helpers? All right, let's continue then. Lin Yi nodded, pleased. He wouldn't force anyone, and it wasn't a big deal if someone wanted to back out now. It was human nature, and he wouldn't hesitate to send them back to the teleportation formation with the others before setting off again. The group continued forward, and Gomang's attacks became more and more intense, but it didn't stop them at all. After all, it didn't dare to attack them head-on, or Lin Yi's killing intent would be enough to send it on its way. After a while, Lin Yi's eyelid twitched. I sensed the location of the third Gomang. From the beginning, he had only been able to sense 2 Gomangs within the range of his perception. He was unable to lock onto the third one's location. Although he couldn't eliminate the possibility of it using some special means to hide, he could now confirm that it was chasing from behind. Furthermore, there was another big guy behind it. Where is it? The group asked. Right behind us, and it brought an even stronger one. It doesn't look friendly. Lin Yi frowned. Before he could do anything else, the Gomang that had been harassing them from the start suddenly charged at them. It was coming at them fiercely, finally coming at them head-on. A cloud of green gas came at them from a tricky angle this time, and it was much closer than before. If Lin Yi dodged to the side like before, the people behind him would be caught in the crossfire, but if he didn't, who knew what would happen to him if he got in contact with it? It wouldn't be a good ending, that's for sure. Careful, Lin Yi bro. Ziyu and the others warned. But Lin Yi wasn't panicking at all. Instead, he had a long-awaited smile on his face. With his strength, no one below the golden core stage could pose a real threat to him. If that Gomang kept harassing them like this, he really wouldn't be able to do anything. But now that it was coming at him head-on, how many lives did it have? Accompanied by a deep dragon roar, the 5 elemental killing aura immediately attacked. In the blink of an eye, it met the terrifying green poisonous gas head-on. In the end, the green poisonous gas collapsed upon contact, unable to withstand a single blow. Then, the Gomang was taken care of as well. The human-faced head was penetrated by the 5 elemental killing aura, leaving a huge bloody hole as it collapsed to the ground. In front of the killing intent of the 5 elements, the green poison gas was just child's play. Dodging it carefully would save one's life, but fighting it head-on was suicide. Chapter 52-22. And this was just Lung Lung. If it was any other normal Foundation establishment perfection master, they wouldn't even be able to compare at all. They weren't on the same level at all. However, before everyone could finish cheering, an extremely strong gust of wind suddenly blew past above their heads. Fortunately, they were surrounded by an extremely dense primeval forest. If it was an open and spacious place like a plain, everyone would definitely be blown away. Even so, everyone had to rely on each other to barely stabilize themselves, and it was difficult for them to move forward. What a big Gomang! Ziyu looked up at the huge silhouette in the sky. The others looked over, and their jaws dropped as well. At this moment, there were 2 figures, one large and one small, hovering in midair. The smaller one was the third Gomang that had disappeared for a long time. In fact, it wasn't considered small given its size. After all, it was more than 3 meters tall when standing upright, but compared to the Gomang beside it, it was a complete dwarf. Whether it was wingspan or body length, this Gomang was at least 5 times its size. Lin Yi had seen quite a few spirit beasts of this size on Skyclass Island, But there weren't many that had this much pressure. Of course, this was also because Lin Yi was too weak right now. If it were his main body here, there wouldn't be any pressure at all. Even if the Gomang was 10 times bigger, it'd still be a toy to him. Be careful, everyone. This guy's at least a golden core stage. Be prepared. Lin Yi said in a low voice. He couldn't tell how strong the opponent was before he made his move, but he was sure that the opponent was in the golden core stage, and it wouldn't be as simple as the early stage or the peak of the early stage. If he didn't handle it well, it would be a fatal threat to everyone. The gigantic Gomang did not attack directly. Instead, it used its bestial eyes to look down at everyone and suddenly said, "Humans, surrender or die." Ling Shan and the others paused, looking at each other. This guy could actually speak human language? The 3 Gomangs were communicating with each other in a very human-like manner, but their words weren't human. They didn't expect this guy to be able to speak human language, too, and with perfect articulation. Lin Yi didn't find it strange at all. Spirit beasts could even turn into humans once they reached a certain level, and speaking human language was a piece of cake. This guy had a human face, too, so it wasn't strange for him to have human vocal cords. As long as it wanted to, it could learn human language. "What are you?" Lin Yi asked calmly as he sized it up. "I am the ancient Gomang king," the giant Gomang replied. Bullshit. Although Gomang's main characteristic is a bird's body and a human face, the Gomang mentioned in the ancient texts were all existences that stood on 2 scarlet snakes. Besides, if you're really the Gomang king from the primordial era, how could you only have this little bit of strength? You don't even have the face to show your face when you don't have a mountain opening period. Do you really think I've never been educated? I. King Gomang was left at a loss for words. His massive face clearly blushed as though he was a fraud who had been exposed on the spot. It was as awkward as one could get. Ling Shan and the others looked at Lin Yi with respect. They'd been nervous to see such a big guy coming at them so fiercely, but Lin Yi was able to make him choke with just 2 sentences. He was practically the reincarnation of Zhuge Wuho. "This place is sealed off, and the qi is lacking. Our Gomang clan is getting weaker with each generation. It's nothing strange that we can't compare to the ancient era." King Gomang was left speechless for a long time before he reacted. He said angrily, "To think that a mere human dares to speak such arrogant words to humiliate me. I'll let you die a tragic death." Lin Yi didn't panic at all, curling his lips nonchalantly. "I'm just speaking the truth, what's there to insult? You're the one who's weaker than the previous generation, can't I question you?" They'd thought that a fight would break out at this point, since they'd all seen how savage Gomang was. He'd even eaten the 3 little ones on sight, let alone this big guy that was at least at the golden core stage. However, the primordial King Gomang didn't attack him directly. Instead, he was surprisingly amicable. He said, "Fine, on account of your reverence for my Gomang race, I can spare your lives as long as you surrender obediently and don't resist." Ling Shan and the others were speechless. None of what Lin Yi had said had been about the Gomang clan. Had they missed it, or was this ancient Gomang king overthinking things? Surrender obediently? Don't resist? Doesn't that mean we're dead? You Gomang treat us humans like food, we saw it all just now. Do you take us for fools? Lin Yi said with a faint smile. Did they really eat it? The ancient Gomang king asked. How can it be fake? Lin Yi curled his lips. Bastard. How dare you steal and eat the tributes? Primordial King Gomang was instantly enraged. He turned around and grabbed the Gomang beside him with his claw. Ignoring the Gomang's pleas for mercy, Gomang crushed it into a pile of mangled corpses that fell from midair. This scene caused everyone to feel a chill run down their spines, and they looked at each other in dismay. Isn't this fellow a bit too ferocious? He even killed his own kind just like that. That crushing strength truly caused one's heart to palpitate. All right, now you can believe my sincerity. As long as you surrender obediently, I promise I won't harm a single hair on you. The ancient Gomang king turned around with a kind face. Only someone with a hole in their brain would believe such nonsense. Everyone scoffed, only to see Lin Yi smile faintly. If you want us to surrender obediently, You should at least let us know how we'll be treated after we surrender, right? If we become your food again, wouldn't we all die a wrongful death? In the name of the ancient Gomang king, I guarantee that you won't be in any danger after you surrender. You'll just have your freedom restricted to a certain extent, and you won't be able to move around freely. Compared to losing your life now, this price is worth it, right? The ancient Gomang king patiently guided them. Lin Yi smiled and suddenly asked, "What's with the tribute?" Chapter 52-23. Is that so? Then let's talk about it. Lin Yi said as he led the group forward, completely ignoring the massive primordial King Gomang in the sky. However, before they could take 2 steps, a sharp wind blade surged down from the sky and struck right in front of them. At the same time, it was accompanied by King Gomang's voice that was filled with killing intent. "Mere humans, how dare you toy with me? Do you really want to die?" The power of the wind blade gave everyone a fright. Even Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. From the looks of it, this King Gomang was probably an existence on par with a golden core late stage at the very least. With his Yuanshan at a mere foundation establishment level, he didn't even dare say he had much confidence against ordinary golden core masters, much less a creature on par with a golden core late stage. Not to mention that he had Lingshan and the others by his side. "Am I toying with you? Aren't you going to allow us to talk about it after making such a harsh request?" Lin Yi asked calmly. Although the opponent's strength was beyond his expectations, he was certain of one thing through this exchange. If the opponent wanted to capture them alive, the primordial King Gomang wouldn't dare attack them unless absolutely necessary. Just like the powerful wind blade from before, it was at most a threat. "All right, I'll give you a chance to talk. But the prerequisite is that you don't take another step forward, or you'll die," King Gomang said sternly. "Don't take another step forward?" Lin Yi laughed when he heard that, saying meaningfully, "That means if we take another step forward, we'll be out of your control. Am I right?" Gomang's face immediately showed a hint of panic. Lin Yi's words had clearly hit the nail on the head. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to emphasize that they couldn't take another step forward. That Gomang subordinate wouldn't have risked his life to launch a sneak attack on Lin Yi's group. There was only one reason: this was the border of their Gomang territory. "Looks like I was right," Lin Yi said with a faint smile. He suddenly took a step forward, stepping right past the deep mark left behind by King Gomang's wind blade. "How dare you!" Primordial King Gomang turned anxious as he immediately attacked with all his might. But at that moment, a hair-raising hissing sound came from opposite him. A gigantic snake dozens of meters long shot into the sky. Its scales were a dazzling bright red, making it look like a gigantic fire snake. Hiss 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 hiss, this human sure is clever. To think that the mighty King Gomang would be fooled by a mere human. How delightful. The gigantic fire snake similarly spoke in the human tongue as it laughed heartily without any fear. Everyone was alarmed when they saw this. A single primordial King Gomang was already troublesome enough, and now, a gigantic fire snake that was clearly not to be trifled with had suddenly appeared. It was as though they had been surrounded by dumplings. Only Lin Yi's face didn't look surprised at all. It was as if he had expected this scene. "Red-scaled serpent, are you trying to ruin my plans?" Primordial King Gomang stared at the gigantic fire snake with an unfriendly expression. A terrifying dark green aura lingered around him, sending chills down one's spine. Hiss 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 hiss. "Darn bird, are you out of your mind? There are so many tributes in my territory. Who's ruining whose plans?" Red-scaled serpent's head suddenly grew a pair of ridiculously large scales. From afar, it looked like a gigantic scarlet ghastly face that left one's hair standing on end. "Bullshit. They're all in my territory," Primordial King Gomang said angrily. "If not for a darn bird like you coming out to obstruct me, they would have long been in my territory. Besides, isn't there already a tribute walking over by itself?" Before red-scaled serpent's voice faded, its tail, which had been hidden somewhere, suddenly swept out from the dense forest, heading straight for Lin Yi. Everyone was shocked. This red-scaled serpent was clearly in a standoff with Primordial King Gomang, but it had already locked onto Lin Yi. These fellows were truly craftier than the last. The red-scaled serpent's tail was extremely fast, But Lin Yi was even faster. This time, he didn't hold back because of Lingshan and the others. With extreme butterfly steps, he turned into a blur, and the snake's tail missed without a doubt. Hiss hiss, this human speed isn't to be underestimated. What an impressive tribute. Red-scaled serpent's expressionless face showed an unprecedented look of shock. It had been guarding this place for countless years, and no one had ever been able to dodge its attacks so easily. It seems like you all care a lot about the tribute. Can you explain to me what tribute it is? Lin Yi had already teleported back to his original spot. If one wasn't strong enough, they would think that he had never left at all. The primordial King Gomang's explanation of the tribute was obviously bullshit. If it was really a tribute, Red-Scaled Serpent wouldn't have said that Lin Yi and the others were tributes. The two were clearly on equal footing, and the Red-Scaled Serpent would never give any tribute to the primordial King Gomang. Moreover, from their tone, it was clear that they were fighting for the tribute. Hiss hiss, so this darn bird didn't explain it to you? Red-Scaled Serpent was a little surprised as it hissed, darn bird, that's where you're wrong. Since you want to capture them as tribute, you can't possibly keep them in the dark, right? Otherwise, why would they be willing to work with you? You darn birds have such ugly faces for nothing. It's a pity that you've never had a brain since ancient times. Don't have a brain? Red-Scaled Serpent, do you believe I won't skin you alive today to restore the glory of the primordial Gomang race? Primordial King Gomang bellowed angrily. I say you don't have a brain, but you really don't. What kind of bullshit glory have you darn birds ever had? Besides, even if we did have a tiny bit of glory, it's only because our red-scaled serpent race was hoodwinked by you in primordial times and foolishly worked for you for a period of time. What else is there to mention? Red-scaled serpent hissed disdainfully. Hoodwinked. H. Our primordial Gomang race's coming-of-age ceremony has always been to capture two red-scaled serpents as close companions. All of this is based on true strength. If not for that lord, your red-scaled serpent race would only be our vassal. You wouldn't have the right to stand here and talk to me, Primordial King Gomang said condescendingly. Chapter 52-24. Come if you have the guts. Gomang laughed coldly. The two big fellows were at each other's throats, and the people below watched with their mouths agape. They had been on tenterhooks until just now. Be it Gomang King or the red-scaled snake, either one of them was enough to wipe them out, especially if they were to attack together. No matter how strong Lin Yi was, he wouldn't be able to protect them. Who would have thought that the two would start fighting each other first? Haha, looks like the ancient Gomang and red-scaled snakes have a deep relationship. This matches up with the ancient legends. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile, but he was more concerned about the great Sir Gomang King had mentioned. It was obvious that the great Sir's existence suppressed the hatred between the two races. From this, it could be deduced that the tribute they were talking about was to satisfy the great Sir's request. A playful smile appeared on Lin Yi's lips. Interesting, very interesting. This place that only appeared once in 1,000 years really did have some hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Boss, what do we do now? Should we use this chance to slip away? Chen Tian didn't dare make a sound, afraid of alerting the two murderous fellows. He only mouthed. The others looked at Lin Yi as well, thinking the same thing. If the two really started fighting, they wouldn't just be spectators. They'd be caught up in the shockwaves, and they'd have to be quick if they wanted to slip away. We can't. Lin Yi shook his head faintly. Those two might look like they were about to fight, but in reality, they had been paying attention to their every move. If there was even the slightest bit of movement, they'd be the first to attack. Then what do we do? Lingshan and the others looked at each other. If they didn't think of a way to slip away, they couldn't just stay here and watch, could they? They'd really lose their lives if they weren't careful, and they wouldn't even have a chance to slip away after the outcome was decided. Don't be too nervous. Let's just wait and see. Lin Yi smiled. To Lingshan and the others, this was indeed a scene that they couldn't even breathe, but to him, it was just a show. At that moment, the primordial King Gomang and the gigantic scarlet-scaled snake were already at daggers drawn. Despite the fuse having been lit, the two suddenly stopped. On account of that, Lord, I'll let you off today. King Gomang snorted coldly. Hiss hiss, who is going to let who go? You damn bird, you really know how to talk big. The red-scaled serpent hissed in laughter. It then glanced at Lin Yi and the others below and said, how about this, we'll split the tributes evenly and mind our own business. It's clearly the territory of our primordial Gomang clan. Why should we split it equally? What wishful thinking. Primordial King Gomang curled his lips in disdain as he said in a tone of charity, how about this? I'll leave the tribute in your territory to you. Everyone will take care of their own territories, or don't blame me for not standing on ceremony, so there's no room for discussion. The red-scaled serpent was enraged. After witnessing Lin Yi's speed, it knew that capturing Lin Yi wasn't realistic at all. If it really did as he said, it wouldn't even get a single tribute, and would face heavy punishment. Of course. King Gomang hadn't even finished his sentence when the red-scaled serpent swooped down towards Lingshan and the others. He was both shocked and angry. How dare you break the Lord's rules? You're courting death. King Gomang didn't dare fall behind and swooped down as well. He couldn't miss out on the rare human tributes that were delivered to his doorstep. Even if he died, he wouldn't let that bastard red-scaled serpent have it. Lingshan and the others were shocked, their faces filled with fear. Now, not only did they not get to watch the show, they'd become the target of everyone. Even if they had a few lives, it wouldn't be enough to kill them. These two were strong existences on par with a Golden Core late stage, and their defensive formation could at most deal with a Foundation establishment level attack. It was completely useless in a situation like this, and even Lung Lung's ice prison mirror wouldn't have any effect. They could only wait for death. At this moment, Lin Yi suddenly said, you two really don't seem to care about me at all, do you? You're nothing in front of us. King Gomang couldn't help but scoff at that. Hiss hiss, looks like you're not smart at all, but a complete idiot. You're just a little faster. You're lucky to be able to escape this disaster. Do you really think you can fight against me and this dead bird? I'm very curious, what's in your head? Is it all shit? Red-scaled serpent mocked without the slightest scruple. Everyone, including Lin Yi, were tributes in their eyes. It was a fool's dream to escape their claws. Of course, it was precisely because they were tributes that they were so patient. After all, the tributes had to be alive, or the Lord wouldn't be satisfied even if they were delivered. If not for that, everyone present would have long become their food. You'll find out what's in my head soon enough, but before that, I want to ask you one last question. What is this master you're talking about? Lin Yi asked back calmly. You want to know? Red-scaled serpent stopped diving down and exchanged a teasing glance with King Gomang. King Gomang also stopped and sneered. Foolish human, as long as you follow me obediently, you will naturally be able to meet that lord. I guarantee you that you won't be disappointed. Oh, forget it. I'm actually not that curious. I was just mentioning it in passing. Lin Yi shook his head. Hiss hiss, you're not that stupid. Anyway, there are still a lot of tributes here. It doesn't matter if you're here or not. It doesn't matter even if you escape. The remaining tributes are enough for me to report. Red-scaled serpent appeared rather carefree. It didn't feel that it was embarrassing for Lin Yi to escape. To it, as long as it could obtain enough human tributes to fulfill its mission, everything else was negotiable. Then, are the two of you not going to compete? Even if all of us surrender, it's still a question of who has more, right? Lin Yi said with a teasing look. Chapter 52-25. SSSSSS, I'll seal your mobility first. As for how to split the spoils, that's a matter for later. Kid, don't embarrass yourself with such a crude attempt at sowing discord, alright? The red-scaled serpent's tone was filled with disdain. Those that could reach their level were no fools. Furthermore, be it the primordial Gomang race or the red-scaled serpent race, they were races with extremely high intellect. They had always been the ones plotting against others. When had they ever been schemed against by others? Is that so? Then I've miscalculated. Lin Yi nodded honestly. Lingshan and the others looked at each other. The situation before them should have been extremely dangerous. In theory, apart from Lin Yi, all of them were facing a tragic fate of being wiped out. Yet, Listening to Lin Yi's conversation with the two fellows, they felt strangely at ease. It was as if everything was under Lin Yi's control. This thought gave them quite a fright. Lin Yi only had the strength of a foundation establishment perfection. He should have been helpless against the Gomang King and the snake. How was he still in control of the situation? Could it be that their absolute trust and worship for Lin Yi had made them think that they were deceiving themselves? Of course you've miscalculated. Be a good tribute. Before he could finish his sentence, King Gomang shot out 4 giant wind blades in a row, overlapping each other to form a well-shaped attack. It sealed off Lin Yi's space to dodge, and unless he wanted to take one of the giant wind blades head-on, all he could do was stay where he was. Even Lingshan and the others, who worshipped and trusted Lin Yi to the core, didn't dare think of taking on Gomang's wind blade head-on. After all, this wasn't Lin Yi's main body, just a pure soul of a foundation establishment level. That would really kill them. Lin Yi's choice was within everyone's expectations. Even when the 4 giant wind blades fell at the same time, he did not move an inch. And in the next moment, just when everyone thought that this was an opening for Lin Yi to escape, the red-scaled snake had already appeared above his head, its huge and ferocious head less than a meter away from Lin Yi. No one expected that primordial King Gomang and crimson-scaled snake would really choose to join forces. They did not even exchange greetings, yet they were able to cooperate so well. Were these two really racial enemies? Lin Yi frowned. Everything else was fine, but the crux was that extremely pungent stench was truly unbearable, and even if he was a soul core, he couldn't help but feel nauseous. Big brother, how many years has it been since you last brushed your teeth? Lin Yi was still in the mood to crack a joke. Hiss, you're still pretending to be calm at a time like this. You humans sure are hypocritical, but you won't have the chance to do so in the future. The red-scaled snake opened its jaws abruptly, as if it was going to swallow Lin Yi whole. Lingshan and the others paled at the sight, but Lin Yi himself didn't have much of a reaction. Instead, he mumbled, "Aren't tributes supposed to be alive? Hiss, as long as you're in my stomach, you won't die for a while." The red-scaled snake laughed delightedly as it bit down. "Is that so? That's a shame. I might be willing to try it some other time, but I'll pass today. So many people are waiting for me, so I'll send you on your way first." With that, Lin Yi did not retreat, but instead went up to meet it, his left hand shoving into the snake's mouth. Haha, weird things happen every year, especially this year. I can't believe I've met one that's coming to die. Gomang couldn't help but laugh at the scene. While he was letting the red-scaled snake take advantage of the situation, there were still so many tributes down there. Letting one go wouldn't be a big deal. But before he could finish laughing, the red-scaled snake's body suddenly expanded like a balloon. Gomang froze. What kind of move was this? He'd never seen the red-scaled snake use it before. Not long after, the long and narrow body of the red-scaled snake had impressively swelled up to the size of a huge balloon. Then, with a bang, it exploded into countless pieces on the spot. Blood rained down from the sky, and a foul stench assailed the nostrils. Gomang was dumbfounded, and so was Lingshan and the others. The entire scene was dead silent. What's going on? Chen and the others looked at each other. Even they couldn't react in time. Such a powerful red-scaled snake had been killed by Lin Yi in one move. Big bro Lin Yi is so strong. Ziyu didn't think too much about it. No matter what Lin Yi did, she wouldn't be surprised at all. Otherwise, how could he be her big bro Lin Yi? No wonder he was purposely distancing himself from us. So that's why. Leng Leng looked at Lin Yi, her eyes sparkling. She didn't know that Lin Yi had such a terrifying killer move, and she didn't know that Lin Yi could kill an existence like the red-scaled snake in one hit. However, she could guess Lin Yi's intentions. If they were to get too close, even if he had a killer move in his hands, they wouldn't dare to use it carelessly. Otherwise, they would be the first to die. "You. Who the hell are you?" The primordial Gomang King stuttered. The red serpent had always been an old rival of his, and they had fought at least 8 out of 10 times. It could be said that they knew each other very well, and their strengths had always been on par. He never expected the red serpent to die in Lin Yi's hands with a bang. Even now, he still didn't know what Lin Yi had done. "Me. I'm just a human's tribute. Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly, as if dealing with the red-scaled snake was nothing more than a trivial matter to him. The more Lin Yi acted in such a manner, the more unfathomable Gomang King felt. He subconsciously flew up, afraid that he would follow in the red-scaled snake's footsteps and die at the hands of this human for no apparent reason. Just who are you? Gomang King sized up Lin Yi again. It doesn't matter even if I tell you my name. Do you think you've heard of me in a place like this? Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. He said casually, looking at how nervous you are, you probably don't want me as a tribute anymore, do you? All right, you may leave. Gomang King agreed. All right, if that's the case, let's go. Lin Yi waved to the group and left without another word. Chapter 52-26. Lin Yi looked up at him and smiled faintly. That's impossible. We came together, so we naturally have to leave together. If you're indignant, feel free to try stopping me. You. Primordial King Gomang was immediately frightened by Lin Yi's tone. He had always been high and mighty, and Lin Yi was nothing more than an ant in his eyes. But now, with this ruckus, he had become the weaker party. He was left dumbfounded by Lin Yi. How about it? Quickly tell me if you agree. We still need to continue on our journey. We don't have time to waste with you. Lin Yi's tone turned more brazen. Punk, this is the territory of our primordial Gomang clan. You want to be unreasonable with me? You're barking up the wrong tree. Primordial King Gomang snorted coldly. Is that so? From your tone, you should be much stronger than Red-Scaled Snake. Why don't you try the attack it just received? I guarantee you that it'll be powerful, Lin Yi said with a faint smile. Punk, do you really think that you can scare me like that? Although the primordial King Gomang maintained an extremely vigilant stance, he couldn't help but show signs of cowering. However, it wasn't realistic for him to be scared off so easily. Ignoring the issue of his reputation, he would be in deep trouble if he didn't have any tributes to report to that lord. I didn't expect to scare you, but do you have the guts to come down and attack me? Lin Yi taunted without any scruples. Primordial King Gomang did not say a word as he sent out a gigantic wind blade. That was his answer. Lin Yi easily dodged it. At Primordial King Gomang's height, the wind blade was only a deterrent at best. It was impossible for it to really hit him. He immediately looked up with a grin. From the looks of it, you don't dare to come down and attack me. The primordial Gomang clan sounds impressive, but if a mighty primordial King Gomang like you acts in such a manner, it's obvious what sort of people they are. How dare you? Primordial King Gomang fell for the goading as he swooped down in exasperation. He only had one target, Lin Yi. Instead of being alarmed, Lin Yi was delighted. He wasn't afraid of King Gomang's wrath, but he was afraid that the fellow would cower and retreat. After all, it was a powerful existence comparable to the late-stage Golden Core realm. Once it targeted them, everyone, including himself, would not be able to live in peace. The only solution was to wipe it out like how he had dealt with Crimson-Scaled Snake. Only then would there be no future problems. Another thing that made Lin Yi feel fortunate was that this guy didn't seem to have any intentions of doing anything to Lingshan and the others. Otherwise, no matter how many tricks he had up his sleeves, he wouldn't be able to protect them. In the blink of an eye, King Gomang's figure was less than 10 meters away from Lin Yi. The dark green miasma around him could almost scrape Lin Yi's face, leaving Lingshan and the others trembling in fear. However, there was nothing they could do in this situation. Even Leng Leng, who was the strongest among them, could only watch from the sidelines. Forcing herself would only make things worse. Of course, Lin Yi had no intention of asking for their help. He was satisfied as long as he could put some distance between them and not implicate them. Go to hell, kid. King Gomang roared with killing intent. As long as the miasma entered their bodies, no human would be able to survive, including Lin Yi, who had no idea what tricks he had up his sleeves. All right, this distance is about right. You can go too. Crimson-Scaled Snake is waiting for you. Lin Yi grinned as he tossed out the pure chi pill firebomb that he had been preparing for a long time in his other hand. From the moment he was targeted by the 3 Gomangs and realized that there was something going on, he had been storing up chi pill firebombs in secret, and not just one, but one in each hand. If this were back on Sky-class Island, he might be much stronger than he was now, but he might not be able to do something like that. It was an extremely dangerous thing to do. The more he stored the bomb, the more unstable it became. Even Lin Yi himself would be in trouble if he made a mistake, not to mention two bombs affecting each other. However, in the 10 months since his soul had been projected into the mortal world, Lin Yi's consciousness had improved by leaps and bounds. His control of qi had become more precise, which was why he was able to do what he was doing now. It was fortunate that he had a qi pill fire bomb in each hand, one against the crimson-scaled snake and one against King Gomang. Otherwise, Lin Yi would really be at a loss. Less than 10 meters above the ground, the true qi core fire bomb exploded with a loud bang. Without the isolation of the red-scaled snake's belly, the power of the explosion this time was much more terrifying than the previous one. Almost everything within a radius of several li was razed to the ground in an instant. Even Lingshan and the others weren't spared from the shockwave. It was fortunate that Lin Yi had purposely put some distance between him and them, and that the pure qi pill firebomb only exploded 10 meters from the ground. Otherwise, they wouldn't just be in a sorry state, they'd be heavily injured. It's dead, right? Lingshan didn't wait for the commotion to pass before she forced her head to look up. That's for sure. Boss is extraordinary. Even the crimson scale snake is dead. That Gomang King must be dead as well, Chen Tian snickered. The others nodded with a smile. Although it was still chaos above, everyone could see that the true qi pill firebomb was just inches away from primordial King Gomang. It would be a miracle if he didn't die from the explosion. However, Lin Yi's expression wasn't as relaxed as the others. They were used to relying on their eyes, and couldn't see what was going on above them. Lin Yi, however, was different. Nothing above them could escape his consciousness, and from what he could sense, the situation wasn't that optimistic. It's really troublesome this time. Lin Yi sighed helplessly. Before he finished, Lingshan and the others gasped in shock as a figure shot out from the chaos. It was King Gomang. That was close, that was close. Luckily, I have shadow escape, or I really would have died from your sneak attack. You're really something, human. Primordial King Gomang wore a look of joy. He was in a sorry state at that moment. His colorful feathers were in tatters. Instead of calling him the mighty primordial King Gomang, it was more accurate to call him a drenched chicken. You're not bad yourself. At least a little stronger than that stupid snake. Lin Yi said faintly, his expression unchanged. Chapter 52-27. After fighting against each other for so many years, suppressing the red-scaled snake had almost become a sore point for it. Now that it had finally achieved its goal, and even made it so that the red-scaled snake would never be able to rise again, this was naturally a matter worthy of celebration. Is it a lot? Lin Yi smiled as well. There was no hint of regret or pity on his face. Instead, it was as though everything was still under his control. Regardless of whether he managed to kill the primordial Gomang King or not, Gomang King could forget about escaping from his grasp. They were on completely different levels. HMPH, kid, stop pretending. You're still too young to be able to scare me, primordial King Gomang sneered as he curled his lips. I admit that you do have some tricks up your sleeves. To think that a mere perfected Foundation establishment human would be able to grasp such a powerful move. There probably isn't another human like you in the world, right? It's a pity that I'm the primordial Gomang King. I won't be scared that easily. Such a terrifying move must take a lot out of me. Using it once is the limit, and using it twice would be a miracle. As for the third time, in other words, he didn't believe that Lin Yi could use it a third time. Otherwise, he would have long fled. He wouldn't have stayed here to waste his breath with Lin Yi. Your analysis makes sense. You're right. I'm helpless against you now. You win, Lin Yi said frankly. With that, Lingshan and the others looked at each other. They didn't know how far Lin Yi could go, but they could guess that Lin Yi's Qi Pill firebomb had great limitations. Using it twice was indeed the limit, but even so, there was no need for him to be so honest, was there? According to their understanding, Lin Yi should at least put on an act to scare the other party. That way, he could at least think of a way to find an opportunity. Why did he just raise his hands and surrender? The one who was most shocked by Lin Yi's words wasn't the crowd, but the primordial Gomang King. He was certain that Lin Yi didn't have a third chi pill firebomb. If Lin Yi had continued holding on, he wouldn't have been able to scare him at all. But now, he felt a little guilty. He couldn't help but mutter, "Is this kid trying to trick me into going down again? Even I've surrendered. They don't even have the strength to fight back. What are you hesitating for? Hurry up and take our tributes away," Lin Yi urged from below. Gomang King immediately felt even more uncertain. He suspected that this was a psychological attack from Lin Yi to scare him away. Escaping from the shadows was a life-saving technique of the Gomang race, but it could only be used once in a short period of time. The chi pill firebomb had already injured him quite badly. If he were to use it again, his chances of survival would be close to zero. However, with so many human tributes right under his nose, he wasn't willing to give up just like that. After all, that lord wasn't so easily fooled. For a moment, Gomang King was in a dilemma. Oi, what's the meaning of this? If you don't say anything, we're leaving," Lin Yi urged again. Seeing that the other was still hesitating, he immediately walked away and said disdainfully, "What, Gomang King? I think you're more like a cowardly rat king. You're so afraid of a mere foundation establishment perfected human. There's really no one like you. You're saying I'm afraid of you?" Gomang King finally reacted when he heard that. "Isn't that so?" Lin Yi looked at him askance. "You don't know what's good for you." Primordial King Gomang grunted as he swooped down at an unprecedented speed. Although he looked like a drenched rat, his aura was far more ferocious than when he was at his peak. This was a result of his bloodlust stirring from his injuries. At this moment, he was far more dangerous than ever. "Boss, be careful." Lingshan and the others were alarmed. Even they could tell that Gomang King was going all out this time. Unless Lin Yi had a third true chi pill firebomb, it would be too much. Lin Yi, of course, didn't have a third pill firebomb. Just now, he had already reached his limit. Even if he could rely on the jade space to replenish his chi, and even if Gomang King's hesitation gave him a chance to condense another pill firebomb, that amount of time was not enough. With his current strength, unless he compressed the pill firebomb to the limit, it would be difficult for him to pose a threat to an existence like Gomang King. At most, it would just be a tickle. And other than the pill firebomb, it was impossible for him to rely on other means to deal with Gomang King with his current Yuanshan physique. Especially when he was facing a berserk Gomang King, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had a slim chance of survival. However, Lin Yi didn't panic in the slightest. He didn't even raise his head to look at King Gomang. Instead, he deliberately lowered his head as the corners of his lips curled into a playful smile. However, it was this expression that made the ferocious primordial King Gomang come to an abrupt halt. When they were less than 10 meters apart, Gomang suddenly charged up again. Furthermore, he was even faster than Gomang had swooped down. He was afraid that a repeat of his previous mistake would result in him suffering another true chi core firebomb. Fuck. Lin Yi immediately cursed. He wore a conflicted expression as though he was about to suffer internal injuries. His hands were surging with powerful and dangerous chi, as though he could lose control and explode at any moment. However, he forcefully controlled it. This punk was indeed up to no good. Gomang King saw all of this clearly and could not help but feel a lingering fear. He was thankful that he had been cautious, or he would have followed in the footsteps of Crimson-Scaled Snake. This human was just too freaking dangerous. Unbeknownst to him, all of this was a show that Lin Yi had specially put on for him. Although the amount of time he had was insufficient to condense a powerful pill firebomb, it wasn't difficult to produce a chi wave that looked extremely dangerous. It was impossible for Gomang King not to fall for such a meticulously designed psychological attack. Chapter 52-28. Lin Yi saw through the fellow's intentions at a glance. He immediately said, "Since you don't dare to come down, scram. It's pointless even if you keep following us. Once we reach the territory of other spirit beasts, even if we become tributes, it'll be theirs. What's so good about you? H, aren't you being too naive if you think you can coax me away just like that? Let me tell you, all of you are my tributes. None of you can escape." Primordial King Gomang replied loudly. Is that so? Lin Yi looked at him with a faint smile and suddenly said, speaking of which, do you really think I can't do a thing to you if you fly a little higher? Kid, I admit that you are very strong and can pose a sufficient threat to me. However, do you have wings? Can you fly? No matter how powerful that move of yours is, do you think it can injure me? Primordial King Gomang scoffed. To be on the safe side, he was at least 50 meters above the ground. Ignoring the fact that Lin Yi's core chi firebomb could not injure him, even if he could fly that high, he would have sufficient time to dodge in advance. Lin Yi chuckled in response. Without another word, he suddenly vanished from the spot without any warning or trace. He's really freaking fast. Primordial King Gomang could not help but grumble. He had already witnessed Lin Yi's movement techniques before. It was the first time he had seen such speed, and this time, he was even faster than before. At the very least, he could vaguely grasp his position previously, but this time, he didn't even know where he was going. It was so elusive that it was inconceivable. Thank you for the compliment. Lin Yi's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Primordial King Gomang jumped in fright, but he immediately reacted. He sneered. True Chi voice transmissions. You sure have a lot of means, but what's the use? You're overthinking things. I'm right here, so why would there be a need for true Chi voice transmissions? Lin Yi stretched out his hand and patted it from behind. This was a real person, and it was not some Jun Chi sound transmission at all. This scared the soul out of Gomang King. For a moment, he forgot to flap his wings and plummeted to the ground like a dead bird. He couldn't figure out how Lin Yi had suddenly appeared behind him. This guy was just a Foundation establishment perfected human. He didn't have wings, nor could he fly. How did he suddenly appear so high up in the sky? What was even more horrifying was that while it was falling vertically, Lin Yi was following closely behind it. He was also falling vertically, and there was clearly a powerful and violent fluctuation of true chi behind him. King Gomang was scared out of his wits. Without waiting for Lin Yi to make a further move, he no longer cared about his reputation. With a strange cry, he fled in a panic, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Who? After landing calmly, Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief. After racking his brains and using all sorts of methods, he had finally managed to trick this fellow away. Boss, what's going on? Wu Chentian and the others quickly surrounded him and asked. Nothing much. I just scared it away. Lin Yi smiled. Although he said it was easy, the situation just now had him breaking out in cold sweat. If he couldn't scare this King Gomang away and allowed him to follow them from the sky, their trip to the primordial trials would be over. This time, he had suddenly transformed into his Yuan spirit form and flew into the sky before suddenly condensing his Yuan spirit form. This move sounded simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. After all, the opponent was an existence comparable to a golden core late stage. It wasn't easy to hide from it. Besides, Lin Yi basically didn't have the ability to protect himself once he was in the air. He would be in danger if the primordial Gomang King were to fight back. This was truly a risky move. Fortunately, he had done a good job laying the groundwork. His opponent was already frightened by the mere twang of a bow, so he was able to successfully scare him away. Otherwise, it would be hard to say what the outcome would be. Boss, you're awesome. You're really awesome. Only then did everyone realize that Lin Yi had been acting all along. First, he had used his strength to kill a giant red-scaled snake, and now he was using his acting to scare off King Gomang. Their boss was indeed skilled in both the pen and the sword. He was practically invincible. Big bro Lin Yi, what do we do now? Ziyu asked. The others all looked at Lin Yi as well. If the fire bats at the start were just a show of strength, then this red-scaled snake and King Gomang had made them truly understand the dangers of the primordial trials. It was a fine line between life and death. Let's keep going. Lin Yi smiled. Then, what if it follows us again? Yu Bing asked. The archaic Gomang King wasn't an idiot, and even if he was scared off by Lin Yi this time, he'd come back to his senses very quickly. Even if he didn't come back to his senses right now, he'd wait until his wounds healed up, and it'd be troublesome if he was targeted again. Everyone looked at Lin Yi. His answer was only 8 words. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. This answer wasn't exactly what they wanted, but it was the most honest answer Lin Yi could give. After all, this was the primordial trials. Anything could happen, and with his current strength, it was impossible for him to keep everyone safe. Dangers like today would happen again in the future, perhaps even 10 times, 100 times more dangerous than today. All he could do was adapt. Everyone fell silent. They finally felt a sense of danger they'd never felt before. If they didn't get stronger quickly, they'd become a burden to Lin Yi, and they'd even die in this godforsaken place. Looking at everyone's serious expressions, Lin Yi's lips curled up a little. This was the expression he wanted. The reason why he'd decided to let everyone participate in the primordial trials wasn't just because of anything else. The most important thing was to train them. After the scare, Lin Yi brought Lingshan and the others on their way. The other 2 paths, however, weren't as lucky. It wasn't just King Gomang and the red-scaled snake that had to loot human tributes. Other spirit beasts that had reached a certain level had the same task as well. This was the primordial trials that happened once in 1,000 years, and everyone was thinking about the river of consciousness and all sorts of miraculous encounters. They didn't think that what awaited them here was a complete massacre. Chapter 52-29. But the others who followed him were miserable. These people were far weaker than Ling Tianyu, and their reactions were not as sharp as his. Once they were targeted by the fox, they had no chance to escape at all. They could only surrender. Fortunately, the tribute was to be kept alive. Otherwise, all of them would have died here. There were more than 20 people in total, and in the end, all 20 of them became tributes to the fox. The others who managed to escape followed Ling Tianyu's idea and fled into the dense forest separately. After all, compared to the tributes of 20 people, the fox would not lose the big picture for the sake of a few people. What's more, the individual strength of these people was not outstanding. Escaping into the dense forest was like drinking poison to quench thirst. There were all kinds of hidden dangers in the dense forest than on the main road. Even Ling Tianyu couldn't guarantee that he could escape unscathed, let alone others. Compared with Ling Tianyu's miserable and embarrassing journey, Duanmuyu's journey was not much better. She had a lot fewer people on her side, but her strength was generally not weak. All of them were courageous and ambitious disciples of the Archaic Alliance. In the eyes of most people, although Duanmuyu was strong, she was far from being comparable to Lin Yi and the others. Even Ling Tianyu, who was at the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment, could suppress her. Choosing to go with her meant that they had chosen the path with the lowest safety guarantee, but at the same time, it also meant that they had chosen the path with the most competitive value. Once they encountered any opportunities or treasures, everyone could fight for them. If it were the other 2 paths, especially the path of Lin Yi and the others, they wouldn't even think about it. Unless they avoided the main road and went into the dense forest alone, they wouldn't be able to get any benefits from Lin Yi and the others. But Duanmuyu's path was different. Not only could they fight for the treasures, but they also had a real chance to get them. It was worth mentioning that Fei Yangsheng was also among these people. He could have gone with Lin Yi and the others. At least compared to the other disciples of the Archaic Alliance who had nothing to do with him, he had a better chance to get some benefits, but his ambition was obviously not limited to this. It was a pity that Fei Yangsheng and the others didn't find any treasures. Instead, they found a one-eyed giant bear. Just like the other powerful spirit beasts that appeared, this was also a powerful existence comparable to a master of the gold core stage. For Duanmuyu and the others, it was a disaster. In the end, Duanmuyu was lucky enough to escape. Everyone else, including Fei Yangsheng, were all turned into tributes. Heaven Lifting Wall was the only cliff in the entire primordial training ground. To other spirit beasts, it was a forbidden zone that they could not easily approach because it was the base camp of the primordial Gomang clan. The sky-reaching wall was filled with caves of varying sizes. Each cave had a Gomang residing in it, and there were hundreds of them in total. And the owner of the huge cave at the highest point was the primordial Gomang king. Your Majesty. When they saw primordial King Gomang fleeing in a pathetic state, all the Gomang were alarmed. Although King Gomang's strength wasn't so powerful that it was invincible, he had few opponents in the sky. Normally, He wouldn't have suffered so much even if he wasn't his match. What was going on today? Are you injured? An old Gomang hurriedly came forward. He was the oldest and wisest advisor here. At the same time, he was the most skilled physician. He immediately checked on King Gomang's injuries. I encountered some trouble. Gomang couldn't keep his face any longer. No matter what, being scared off by a human like Lin Yi wasn't something to be proud of. Could it be the work of the red-scaled snake? Old Gomang guessed. The red-scaled snake's territory was just next door, so it was common for them to fight each other. And with the red-scaled snake's strength, it was indeed enough to heavily injure King Gomang. However, it definitely wouldn't be any better off. It's already dead, King Gomang said vaguely. Really? It wasn't only old Gomang. Even the other Gomangs revealed looks of delight when they heard that. The red-scaled snake was their nemesis, so this was a joyous occasion. It's no wonder you were so heavily injured. You even had to use shadow stripping. Not a bad deal. Old Gomang nodded immediately before saying, then, shouldn't we quickly send some Gomang to take over the red-scaled snake's territory? Otherwise, we'll be giving it to someone else for free. The red-scaled snake was a solitary creature. With its death, the territory would naturally become vacant. It was a juicy piece of meat. I'll leave the arrangements to you, said King Gomang casually. Yes. Old Gomang answered happily. After a pause, he said, by the way, Your Majesty, that Lord's envoy is here. He's waiting in your cave. I got it. King Gomang's heart sank. What he feared had really come. How was he to answer to Lin Yi after suffering such a huge setback at the hands of Lin Yi? Striding into the extremely spacious cave, one could see richly ornamented beams and painted rafters. It was a place of antiquity and opulence. It was rare to find such a place in the mortal world. If an outsider were to enter without any knowledge, they would definitely not think that this was King Gomang's cave abode. All of this was the work of King Gomang. Although the primordial Gomang race had a human face and bird body, be it their thoughts or customs, they spontaneously looked up to humans. They revered human culture from top to bottom, and any Gomang with a bit of status or hierarchy would have their cave abodes filled with primordial culture. King Gomang was the pinnacle among them. Of course, revering human culture was one thing, but it did not change the fact that humans were food in their eyes. Learning and eating were two different matters. In the past, King Gomang would be in a good mood every time he returned to his cave abode. But this time, he was trembling as though he was treading on thin ice. If not for the fact that he knew he could not escape, he would have turned tail and fled. As he walked into the cave abode with an uneasy heart, King Gomang immediately saw a tiny figure on the table. It looked like a white and plump worm, but he did not dare lower his guard. Instead, his heart palpitated as he nearly knelt down on the spot. Lord Envoy, I've been impolite for keeping you waiting. King Gomang held his breath as he bowed reverently. Speak clearly. Were you impolite or did you fail? The worm's voice was sharp and thin, giving off the feeling of a child. However, it had a baffling aura that left one's heart palpitating. Chapter 52:30. Tell me the details. The bug's tone was a little mysterious. Yes, there was an expert among the human tributes I encountered. He finished off Red-Scaled Snake with a single strike and then used the same move to heavily injure me. Thankfully, I had the life preservation skill of shadow stripping, otherwise, I would have followed in Red-Scaled Snake's footsteps. Furthermore, that human seemed to be able to fly. In short, he was unfathomable, said King Gomang in a deep voice. Is that so? What's that human called? The bug asked casually. I think he's called Lin Yi, Gomang said quickly. Lin Yi didn't say who he was, but Ziyu and the others mentioned it a few times, so it wasn't strange for him to remember it. Lin Yi. The little white worm memorized this name, and said with great interest, it's rare to see a human who can kill a red-scaled snake in one move, and he can even fly. If there are more of such tributes, I think Master will be very happy. Yes, no matter how strong that Lin Yi is, he won't be able to escape from the Master and the Envoy. Tributes are tributes, and his fate was decided the moment he stepped in here. Gomang smiled apologetically. All right, let's talk about yourself. What are you going to do? letting so many human tributes slip through your fingers? The little white worm looked at it and said. It was clearly looking up, but it gave off a powerful sense of oppression, as if it was looking down at it from a higher position, causing one to tremble in fear. This. King Gomang immediately broke out into a cold sweat from his anxiety. He knew very well what the outcome would be if he failed to capture the human tributes. He didn't even dare imagine such a scenario. He hurriedly said, "Envoy, don't worry. I'll definitely make up for my mistakes and deliver the human tributes in time." Make amends for your mistakes. Tell me, how are you going to make amends? The little white worm suddenly laughed and said non-committally, "As far as I know, those human tributes have already left your territory. Now that they're in someone else's territory, they're their tributes. If you try to steal them, you'll be breaking the rules and will be heavily punished." If not for that, King Gomang and Crimson Scaled Snake would not have wasted their time. They could only act freely in their own territory. That was the most basic rule. Furthermore, it was set by that lord himself. No one dared to defy it. That. King Gomang was momentarily at a loss for what to do. In fact, he had already thought of this on the way back. Back then, he was thinking of sneaking to another territory to steal someone. With his advantage in the air, he could do it without anyone noticing. Who knew that the envoy was already waiting for him before he even returned to his lair? "How about this? I'll give you a way out," the little white worm said calmly. "Lord Envoy, please speak." "I represent the entire Gomang clan in thanking you," said King Gomang hurriedly. "Scatter all the Gomang of your tribe. No matter whose territory it is, have them search for any lone human tribute. If they find one, capture it alive. If they can't, send it to Master," ordered the little white worm. "Yes, as you wish, Lord Envoy." King Gomang was delighted when he heard that. Although the mission wasn't difficult, in the entire primordial trial grounds, only their Gomang clan could accomplish it. This was because they were the only aerial faction of a certain scale. Of course, there's no need for you to go alone. A large target will easily invite unnecessary trouble, added the little white worm. Even if one or two ordinary Gomang went to the territory of other spirit beasts, nothing would happen. The other spirit beasts typically wouldn't think anything of them, but King Gomang was different. If he were to fly over someone else's territory, it would be no different from a declaration of war. "Then, what should I do?" asked King Gomang. "You." The little white worm paused as it sized up King Gomang and said meaningfully, "Pass down the instructions first." "Yes." King Gomang immediately did as he was told. With a command, all the Gomang of various sizes were mobilized. Only then did he return to report to the little white worm. "Lord Envoy, feel free to instruct me if you have any other requests. I'll definitely not hesitate to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a frying pan." The primordial King Gomang was still busy expressing his loyalty. Although the envoy looked unassuming, he was the representative of that lord. The authority he wielded was no trifling matter. Even a hegemon like him had no choice but to bow and scrape to him. "I'm hungry," said the little white worm. What? King Gomang was momentarily taken aback, thinking that he had misheard. "I've been asleep for centuries." "I'm hungry," repeated the little white worm. King Gomang finally understood. He could not help but click his tongue as he bit the bullet and asked, "Then, what would you like to eat?" "I'll think of a way." The envoy looked fair and tender, so what he ate was definitely different from his Gomang clan. But since the envoy had made such a request, he had to find a way to satisfy it. However, the little white worm laughed as it stared intently at King Gomang. "There's no need to go through so much trouble. You can do it." "Ah!" King Gomang was momentarily taken aback. Before he could react, the little white worm had already bounced up from the table and instantly stuck to his face like a cannonball. No matter how he struggled, he was unable to shake it off. "Be good and don't struggle. That way, you'll feel less pain." The little white worm suffused a terrifying red glow. With the passage of time, the red glow became more and more blinding and demonic. It left one shuddering. Brain-eating worm. Only then did primordial King Gomang have a flash of inspiration. He finally recalled the special envoy's origins. This was the famous brain-eating worm. Before that lord appeared, the brain-eating bug was a nightmare for the entire primordial trial grounds. Wherever it went, there would be a reign of terror. Countless powerful spirit beasts had died in its hands. It was only when it encountered that lord did it cease to exist. After that, it became that lord's special envoy. King Gomang was well aware of this period of history. Logically speaking, he should not have been so careless. However, he had just been agitated by Lin Yi. Furthermore, the envoy had been asleep for centuries. His ferocious might from before had already subconsciously faded from his mind. Only now did he realize what had happened. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The brain-eating worm had already stabbed into his face. Before he could even struggle, a long, thin mouth had penetrated his skull and smashed into his brain. In a blink of an eye, his brain juice was sucked clean. King Gomang was reduced to a brainless corpse as he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 52-31. It's been a few hundred years since I've eaten. TSK, I've almost forgotten the taste of food. The brain-devouring worm shot a glance at King Gomang's corpse before slowly crawling out. When it reached the cave's entrance, it suddenly leaped up. Then, in midair, after a free fall, the 5-colored mark on its back suddenly lit up. Then, with a surge, it grew a pair of gigantic wings. In the forest, Lin Yi's group continued advancing. With Gomang King and the red-scaled snake as an example, Lin Yi was constantly condensing his qi so that he wouldn't be caught off guard when something unexpected happened. Of course, Lin Yi couldn't hold a qi bomb in his hand all the time. Even if he didn't have to worry about not having enough qi, it would still take a lot of stamina, and if he wasn't careful, it would cause a huge mess. What he was doing now was raising the qi in his body to a level far higher than normal. This way, he could shorten the time he needed to condense the bomb. This way, he wouldn't use up too much stamina, and he wouldn't be at a loss when something unexpected happened. It was a win-win situation. Other than that, Lin Yi also expanded his consciousness to its maximum range. This way, he would be able to sense the slightest movement and have enough time to react. With these 2 points, the group's safety was guaranteed to a certain extent. At least, they wouldn't have to face off against a golden core late-stage spirit beast. If it was just a normal spirit beast blocking the way, he wouldn't even need to do anything. He just had to watch from the side, and Lung Lung and Lingshan would be able to take care of them. This was a rare opportunity for them to train in real combat. After the group took down the 3rd spirit beast, the sky darkened. Lin Yi called out to the group, "Let's rest here, it's too dangerous to travel at night. We'll continue in the morning." "All right." The group nodded. To tell the truth, these 3 spirit beasts weren't that strong, but to them, who were only early stage, it was troublesome. They needed some rest. "Boss, do we need to split into groups?" Yu Bing reminded. "There's no need for that. Your task is to rest well and adjust to your peak condition before daybreak. As for guarding, leave it to me." Lin Yi smiled. To him, this was a trivial matter. Moreover, in this kind of environment, true vigilance required a powerful divine sense. Otherwise, it would just be a facade, and this was something that everyone clearly did not meet. All right. No one objected to this. They needed a good rest, or else they would be a burden to the others tomorrow. Lin Yi guided everyone to sit down and rest in a formation that they could quickly respond to. After all, this place was full of danger, and they could not let their guard down at night. As for himself, he chose a big tree at the side. Not only did it have a wide field of vision, it was also convenient for him to sense. Looking up at the stars in the sky, listening to the strange cries coming from all directions, thinking back to what happened during the day, Lin Yi didn't feel scared at all. Instead, he felt a little excited. He was a natural-born adventurer, and if this ancient trial wasn't full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons, he wouldn't be so excited. But it would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried at all. Even with the pill firebomb, Lin Yi was at the peak of the foundational level. It wouldn't be easy for him to protect everyone. At most, he would be able to give it his all in case of an emergency, but to say that he could control the situation was just a pipe dream. But what is it that I'm missing? Lin Yi sighed. He had never been sad about breaking through before, even when he reached the nascent soul stage and the profound ascension stage. However, this time he was stuck at the peak of the foundational level, and he really couldn't understand it at all. Not to mention the brain, he couldn't even touch the stone. How could he cross the river? But no matter what, Lin Yi would still keep trying, even in this situation. Anyway, when he was cultivating, his divine sense would not weaken, but it would become more sensitive, and it wouldn't delay the vigilance task. What Lin Yi didn't know was that in the process of his continuous attempts, his body in the middle island of the heavenly stage suddenly had an abnormal reaction. Lin Yi, you're awake. Tian Chan saw that Lin Yi's body suddenly exuded a strong aura, and suddenly she was shocked. Usually, in addition to alchemy, she would usually stay by Lin Yi's side. For so many months, Lin Yi hadn't returned, which really made her, Sydney, and Wei Shenjin worried, but fortunately, Lin Yi's aura had always been very stable, and he also replied through the Central Chamber of Commerce, which made them feel relieved. But now, this was the first time in so many months. Lin Yi's aura was obviously getting stronger rapidly, and there was no sign of it stopping. It was getting stronger and stronger, and in the blink of an eye, it had caught up with Lin Yi's previous peak state, far stronger than the average early-stage profound ascension master. If it wasn't for the special formation reinforcement of these houses in the Middle Island Commercial District, the aura alone would be able to destroy the houses. What's wrong? Sydney noticed the strangeness in the room, and rushed up without caring about the business. When she saw Lin Yi's state, she was stunned, and said with surprise and joy, "Is he coming back?" Maybe. Tian Chan was also not sure. She didn't know what the situation would be like when the primordial spirit projection returned, but at least one thing was certain, Lin Yi's state must be that something was going to happen. Then what should we do now? Sydney was a little panicked. She could only helplessly look at Lin Yi and then look at Tian Chan. Although she was usually in charge of the Tiandan Pavilion's matters, when Lin Yi was not around, Tian Chan was the real backbone. But at this time, Tian Chan also did not know what to do. She thought for a while and said, "Why don't you ask Brother Wei to invite Senior Brother Cai Zhongyang and Senior Brother Hu Guanqi to have a look? They have rich experience and are also medical experts. If there is any problem, they should be able to see it." "Okay, I'll go call him now." Sydney heard this and immediately went downstairs to ask Wei Shenjin to find them. Chapter 52-32. To be honest, the person who could help the most at this time should be the acting island master Okuda. Even if he did not have the personal experience of soul projection, he could at least come forward and ask Southern Sky Aurora, and he could also consult the Island Master Pavilion steward in this area. It was a pity that Okuda was a pure outsider after all, and he was also a very high-ranking person. Previously, he had been troubled twice by the matter of sending the letter. Tian Chan and the others were already a little uneasy. If they ran to him again when there was a slight problem, it would be too much. Even if the other party did not say it, they would also feel bad. Soon, Wei Shenjin found Cai Zhongyang and Hu Guanqi. The two hurriedly walked into the room, and when they saw Lin Yi's state, they revealed a look of surprise at the same time and looked at each other. What did the two senior brothers see? Tian Chan asked quickly. He hasn't woken up yet, right? Cai Zhongyang and Hu Guanqi looked at each other and asked. No, what's wrong? Tian Chan and Sydney both shook their heads. So far, although Lin Yi's aura was strong to the extreme, and even caused chaos downstairs, and had to temporarily close the shop, he really did not have any intention of waking up. Since he hasn't woken up, why is this situation happening to him? Cai Zhongyang looked inexplicable. This situation? Tian Chan and Sydney were stunned when they heard this. You have experienced this situation before, isn't it a sign before a breakthrough? Hu Guanqi explained. Breakthrough? Lin Yi is going to break through? The two women finally reacted. They were typical people who were closely involved in the situation, and because they were too worried, they forgot that this familiar scene was a unique sign before a breakthrough. It was just that Lin Yi was now at the early stage of mysterious ascension, and the movement of the breakthrough was far beyond their expectations. That seems to be the case, but there's one thing I don't understand. Since he hasn't woken up yet, how could he have broken through? Cai Zhongyang was puzzled. Breaking through was a very important matter for cultivators. No matter how talented they were, they would need to give it their all in order to have a chance of success. As for breaking through in one's sleep in an unconscious state, that was something that had never happened before in the world of cultivation. Was it even possible to wake up and discover that one had broken through? At least in Cai Zhongyang and Hu Guanqi's understanding, this was absolutely impossible. However, Lin Yi's current state was overturning their understanding bit by bit. Yeah, he can't be cultivating even when he's sleeping, right? Hu Guanqi also found it unbelievable. If he's just cultivating while he's sleeping, then it's easier for me to understand. After all, he's Lin Yi, not an ordinary person. It's not strange for him to do something that defies common sense. But now he's projecting his primordial spirit. It's obvious that his primordial spirit isn't here, so how can he control the circulation of his innate qi? Cai Zhongyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. When people were sleeping, their consciousness was still active. For cultivators, it was just that their primordial spirit was still in a normal state. It was just a kind of subconscious self-control. Although it was rare to cultivate under such circumstances, strictly speaking, it was not difficult to imagine. But Lin Yi's primordial spirit wasn't even here, and it was not just simple cultivation, but directly breaking through on the spot. What the hell was this? Just as everyone was talking, the aura on Lin Yi's body had impressively broken through its original limit. Everyone only felt a powerful invisible wave of qi from Lin Yi's body, and they all took a few steps back in unison. Only then did they stagger and stabilize their bodies. Then, there was a moment of incredible silence. Watching as Lin Yi's aura stabilized little by little, and gradually returned to the original undetectable state, Cai Zhongyang and Hu Guanqi were both stunned. After a long time, they looked at each other and said a few words, the peak of the early stage of profound ascension. Just now it was just a bold guess, but now it had simply become a living reality. In this world, there was really someone who could break through in a state of unconscious or even without a primordial spirit, and it was at a high level like the profound ascension stage. It was really incredible. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they would never believe it even if they were beaten to death. Tian Chan and the others were also stunned, but compared to the breakthrough, Tian Chan and Sydney were more concerned about Lin Yi's current state, for fear that something unexpected had happened to Lin Yi. Don't worry, his state is the same as before, there's no big problem. Hu Guanqi carefully examined Lin Yi's body, and did not find any abnormalities, all the signs were very stable. Oh, that's good. Tian Chan and the others were relieved. But what is going on with him? How did he break through? Cai Zhongyang was still frowning, puzzled. Come on, this is too bizarre for us, we can't figure it out by ourselves, we can only wait for him to wake up and ask. Hu Guanqi shook his head with a bitter smile. Tian Chan and Sydney looked at each other. In their opinion, it didn't matter what the breakthrough was, as long as there was no problem with Lin Yi's body. Waiting for Lin Yi's primordial spirit to return safely, this was their biggest wish. This time, the storm was more frightening than dangerous, and Tian Chan and the others were shocked, but Lin Yi, who was far away in the ancient trial ground, was unaware of it. What's going on? Lin Yi mumbled to himself. When he tried to break through just now, it was obviously different from before. There seemed to be a sign that he was about to break through, but this subtle feeling didn't last long, it disappeared without a trace, and then he fell into the original bottleneck. No matter how hard he tried, the barrier was still there, unmoving. If it was someone else in this situation, they would definitely be depressed for a while. Did they grab a life-saving straw, only to find out that it was really just a straw? Just thinking about it was depressing, but Lin Yi maintained his mentality, he didn't think too much about it. He looked down at the people who were quietly resting, and coincidentally met Lung Lung's gaze. The two couldn't help but smile at each other. The Prime Val trials this time was not a small test for everyone, and among them, the one with the most pressure would be Lung Lung. She was the second strongest after Lin Yi, and every time they encountered a spirit beast, she would be the main force. At the same time, she had to take on the responsibility of protecting Lingshan and the others, and the pressure was not small at all. Chapter 52-33. One day's worth of hard work was equivalent to a month's worth of hard work. An opportunity like this wasn't something that one could simply come across. The two looked at each other, understanding each other without words. Lung Lung nodded slightly and went back to recuperating. She had expended quite a lot of energy in the day, and if everything went well, she would have to take on the main responsibility tomorrow. She couldn't afford to slack off. The night passed uneventfully. By the time the sun rose, everyone had basically recovered to their peak condition, and they continued their journey under Lin Yi's lead. The next 2 days, the group's experience could be said to be more daunting than dangerous. Although they did encounter various kinds of spirit beasts along the way, most of them were only at the foundation establishment stage. Lin Yi didn't even need to do anything, as long as Lung Lung and Lingshan could take care of them. To the group, it had become a true battle training journey. As for the spirit beasts that were as strong as Golden Core practitioners, Lin Yi could basically take care of them with a pure chi pill firebomb. At the very least, he could scare the opponent away. As long as there weren't more than 2 of them appearing at the same time like before, it wasn't a big problem. Of course, Golden Core spirit beasts usually had their own territory, and each territory could only have 1 master. Unless they happened to step on the dividing line, the probability of encountering such a situation was not high. However, on the 3rd night, Lin Yi's group welcomed an uninvited guest. Lung Lung and the others were recuperating as usual. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was guarding the tree trunk out of habit. Suddenly, his expression changed. At the furthest end of his divine senses range, there was clearly a flying spirit beast approaching their direction at high speed. Gomang. Lin Yi paused. The silhouette of the flying spirit beast was extremely blurry, but judging from its wings, it was most likely the primordial Gomang that they had met before. Lin Yi's first thought was that the primordial King Gomang had chased up to him, but he quickly rejected that theory. This was because the other party wasn't that big in size. It was a far cry from primordial King Gomang's massive body. At best, it was an ordinary Gomang. There was nothing to be afraid of if it was just an ordinary Gomang. Ignoring Lin Yi, even Cooled and company could deal with it calmly after the past few days of combat training. However, Lin Yi's expression was rather heavy. For some reason, Gomang gave him an inexplicable sense of danger. This was a feeling he had never felt when he faced the primordial Gomang King and crimson-scaled snake. Something is coming from the sky. Everyone, be careful. Lin Yi did not dare to neglect and immediately reminded Cooled and the others below. Cooled and company immediately felt as though they were facing a formidable foe. They knew very well that this thing was no trifling matter. Otherwise, with Lin Yi's habits over the past few days, he wouldn't have been so nervous and cautious. He didn't even warn them and instead let them sense it themselves, using this as a test of their ability to react. For the past few days, Lin Yi wasn't playing the role of a pure guardian, but an instructor. However, it was clearly not the time to test them before figuring out the strength of that thing. Moments later, the thing was only half a kilometer away from them. Although it had an unfathomable aura lingering around it that could fool most people's perception, Lin Yi would have wasted all his years if he couldn't see its true form at this distance. Worm. Lin Yi was taken aback. It clearly had a pair of gigantic Gomang wings, but its body was a white and tender worm. This scene was so bizarre that it left him amused. How could it be a worm? Worm? What worm? Cooled and company were baffled. Their perception range was not that far away. Even if it was that far away, they wouldn't be able to see through the unfathomable aura on the other party. Lin Yi didn't answer, but he didn't let his guard down. No matter how funny the other party's appearance was, his increasingly strong sense of danger wouldn't lie. In the cultivation world, people who judged people by their appearance generally didn't live long, and Lin Yi was never one of them. In the blink of an eye, the other party was less than 20 meters away from Lin Yi. It calmly landed on the trunk of a big tree on the opposite side, facing Lin Yi directly. "You're Lin Yi?" The brain-eating bug sized up Lin Yi with great interest. Lin Yi was slightly surprised when he heard that. He could guess that the other party was coming for his group, but he didn't expect the other party to call out his name. He immediately asked bluntly, "How do you know?" "Simple. It's because I ate primordial King Gomang," the brain-eating bug answered frankly. This answer immediately stunned everyone. Cooled and company exchanged looks and could not help but suspect if the fellow was bragging. For such a tiny worm to be able to eat the massive primordial King Gomang, what kind of joke was that? Lin Yi fell into thought. He was momentarily unable to imagine how the other party had eaten primordial King Gomang, but his intuition told him that it was an extremely dangerous fellow, far more dangerous than primordial King Gomang. Then, who are you? Lin Yi continued asking. Envoy. In their words, I'm that lord's envoy. The brain-eating bug remained very frank. Envoy. Lin Yi's eyes flashed slightly because he saw the pair of gigantic wings on the other party's back instantly vanish. Now, it looked like a white worm through and through, appearing even more harmless. While Lin Yi was sizing up the brain-eating bug, the brain-eating bug was also sizing him up. As for Cooled and the others below, the brain-eating bug was not interested in them at all. It seemed to be only interested in Lin Yi. Are you here to capture the tributes as well? Lin Yi continued probing. This guy's reaction was completely different from all the other spirit beasts he'd met before. All the spirit beasts, including the ancient Gomang King and the red-scaled snake, had only cared about the number of tributes. They weren't interested in a troublesome human like him at all, completely different from this insect envoy. You can say that. The brain-eating bug's answer was non-committal. It was an envoy, unlike primordial King Gomang, who had to provide sufficient human tributes in order to survive. Even if it did nothing, it would not suffer any punishment. However, since they had encountered each other, it did not matter if it was just a little help. All right, I have no more questions. Lin Yi nodded. At the same time when he finished his sentence, Cooled and the others understood and moved forward at the same time. This was the secret signal that they had agreed on earlier. Although it was very dangerous to do so at night, and they might encounter other unpredictable dangers ahead if they were not careful, but it was much better than everyone staying here in front of a strong enemy. Chapter 52-34. However, Lin Yi was already prepared for this. Before it could cast the wind blade, Lin Yi's figure flashed and blocked in front of it. Roar! You human really have a lot of guts. The brain-eating insect suddenly laughed. This scene was really funny in the eyes of those who did not know. Hearing this sentence from the mouth of a harmless white insect, even if Lin Yi knew that the other party was not simple, he could not help but feel strange and speechless at this time. As the brain-eating insect's voice fell, 2 wind blades immediately whistled out. The target changed from Cooled and the others to Lin Yi, who was close at hand. At such a short distance, there was no chance to dodge. As soon as the wind blades formed, they were directly attached to Lin Yi's body. If this continued, he would immediately be dismembered. Really? I think you have a lot of guts. Lin Yi replied unhurriedly. He did not take any action against the wind blades because it was not necessary. The real chi pill firebomb condensed in his hand had been pressed on the other party's face in advance. Although it did not delay much time, Lin Yi had habitually maintained the real chi in his body at a higher intensity these days. The time to condense the real chi pill firebomb was greatly reduced. At this time, the power of the attack was close to the limit of his strength. Boom! The tranquility of the night was shattered by a loud bang. The surrounding area of a few miles was razed to the ground in an instant. Within 100 miles, it was a mess. Many spirit beasts fled in panic. Cooled and the others had escaped a certain distance at this moment, and with the previous experience, although everyone was in a sorry state, no one was injured. Who? Lin Yi let out a long breath. If he detonated the real chi pill fire bomb at such a close distance in the past, he would inevitably suffer a heavy backlash, but now his speed was much faster than before when he was at his peak. Moreover, he could freely switch between the primordial spirit form and the semi-primordial spirit form, which was enough to avoid most of the backlash damage. However, it was different for the brain-eating worm, which bore the brunt of the attack. The pill fire bomb detonated right on its face, and the damage was immeasurable. Even an existence like primordial Gomang King, who was comparable to a late-stage golden core expert, would definitely die from such a direct hit to his face. However, Lin Yi quickly frowned once more, and his frown was even tighter than before. Because his divine sense told him that not only did he not lose his life on the spot, he wasn't even heavily injured. Roar roar, as expected of a human who could kill the red-scaled snake. I have to say, you do have some ability. When Brain Eater reappeared, it was already a kilometer away. Apart from some scorch marks on its body, there were no other serious injuries, and it even looked rather relaxed. It said half jokingly and half fearfully, "Luckily, I copied the Gomon clan's shadow escape, or I would have really suffered." This time, Lin Yi was truly shocked. The real Chi Pill Fire Bomb was his strongest trump card. Apart from that, his other means, including the 5 elemental killing Chi, were hardly a threat to an existence at the Golden Core stage. At the end of the day, he was only a primordial spirit. Even if he had mastered the primordial spirit form and the semi-primordial spirit form, which were unique to primordial spirits, they were still far inferior to the heaven-defying qualities of his main body. Lin Yi's heart sank as he looked at the guy's nonchalant face. It would have been easier to accept if the pure Chi Pill firebomb hadn't hit the guy, but he'd clearly pressed it against his face and detonated it. Even if the guy had used a skill like Shadow Stripper, he wouldn't have been able to dodge the damage in the first instant. But all it did was scratch the guy's itch. How could he accept that? "Let's go. Lung Lung, lead the team and take care of everyone. I'll meet up with you guys after luring it away." Lin Yi hurriedly communicated with Lung Lung and the others. He was not this nervous even when he faced the primordial Gomon King and the red-scaled snake at the same time. However, this time, he really had no confidence at all. Luring the opponent away and meeting up with the others was the only way he could think of. This. Song Lingshan and the others looked at each other, worried. They never thought that things would become so serious. It was just a bug, how could it be so terrifying? "Let's go." Lung Lung was the first to react. She immediately led the others away. She was very clear that the longer they stayed, the more danger Lin Yi would be in. There was no room for delay or hesitation in a matter of life and death. Looking at Lung Lung's back as she led the others away, Lin Yi's lips curled into a gratified smile. What made him even more gratified was that the bug had no intention of chasing after them. Its target was very clear, it was him. "You seem to be very concerned about those people." The brain-eating bug wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, it asked with interest. "Does that matter? Since your target is me, letting them go should be something that doesn't matter to you. Am I right?" Although Lin Yi was shocked, he did not show it on his face. He was still calm and at ease. "Exactly." The brain-eating bug nodded. Its target from the beginning was not the so-called human tributes. After all, the tributes were prepared for that master. It was here to eat it alone. "That's good. Why don't we wait a little longer?" Lin Yi said casually. "You're very interesting, human. This is what you guys call pushing your luck, right?" The brain-eating bug laughed. A bug's face showed all kinds of human-like expressions. This scene was weird no matter how one looked at it. "Not really. In my understanding, this is called friendly negotiation," Lin Yi said shamelessly. "Friendly negotiation?" The brain-eating bug was stunned for a moment before it realized what it meant. It suddenly laughed so hard that its entire body arched. It said breathlessly, "Well, it seems that I didn't come in the wrong this time. You're indeed a rare human sample." "Sample?" Lin Yi pretended to be surprised, but he was relieved in his heart. If this guy insisted on making a move to keep Lung Lung and the others, he would not be able to do anything. He had to admit that this bug was actually quite smart. "Yes, it's a sample. In your human language, it basically means food, but it's slightly different," the brain-eating bug said bluntly. Chapter 5235. It's your honor. To be able to become my food, you have to be at least a character like the primordial Gomon King. Even if the average person was sent to my mouth, I wouldn't like to eat them. The brain-eating bug said bluntly. This was the truth. Eating brains was its innate ability, but it wasn't just eating. The key was that after eating the brain, it could copy the other party's ability. If it was an average person, it wouldn't benefit much even if it ate them. It would just be a waste of energy. "Oh, then don't I have to thank you for your favor?" Lin Yi said with a faint smile. "You're welcome." The brain-eating bug was frank. After waiting for a moment, it said, "It's about time. I'm going to make my move." With that said, without waiting for Lin Yi's reaction, the brain-eating bug's body suddenly grew a lot longer. The wings were still on its back, but its body had become a giant snake. At first glance, it had the charm of a red-scaled snake. Not only that, but its snake body also grew 4 extremely sharp claws. It was unknown what kind of powerful spirit beast its original form was, but just a glance was enough to make one shudder in fear. What a monster! Lin Yi sighed when he saw this. If this guy's image continued to develop, it would probably become a knockoff version of a dragon. Sighing was one thing, but Lin Yi's actions weren't slow at all. Taking advantage of this moment, he had already condensed a true chi pill firebomb in his hand. Even though he knew he couldn't kill the other party, he could only do so. After all, it was his most powerful means. Again. You really don't want to give up. This time, the brain-eating bug didn't use the primordial Gomang race's shadow escape to retreat. Instead, it directly clawed at the primordial Gomang race and exploded it on the spot. It was unyielding and domineering. So fierce. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched. He knew his opponent wasn't simple, but he didn't expect it to be this strong. Even if the true chi pill fire bomb's power hadn't reached its limit, it definitely couldn't be underestimated. As a result, after the true chi pill firebomb detonated, the brain-eating insect's body had a few more scorched black scars. The injury was more serious than before, but it was still not to the point of hurting the muscles and bones. Instead, it stimulated its fierceness. It immediately roared and rushed over to swallow Lin Yi. Unfortunately, Lin Yi did not give her the chance at all. As early as the moment when the true Chi Dan firebomb detonated, he had already used the aftermath to escape a long distance away. Of course, the direction he chose was completely opposite to Cooled and the others. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to delay for so long. You escaped pretty fast, but it's a pity that you met me. The brain-eating bug looked at Lin Yi, who had become a small black dot in the distance, and smiled. With a flap of its wings, it immediately chased after him. The brain-eater was very fast, but it was much slower than Lin Yi. Even if Lin Yi escaped on the ground and it flew in the sky, it could only hang on. It was not easy to close the distance. This guy's speed isn't slow. Lin Yi looked back at the brain-eating insect in the sky. Although he said so, his expression was relaxed. Not to mention anything else, at least in terms of speed, he had absolute confidence. As long as he wanted to, he could get rid of the opponent in minutes because he was only using the super butterfly subtle steps at the moment. There was still the super extreme butterfly subtle steps that he hadn't used yet. For Lin Yi, it was not a good thing to get rid of the opponent too early because it was likely to transfer the danger to Cooled and the others. Anyway, he had enough confidence to escape. Hanging on to the brain-eating insect like this was the best choice. However, this was not without any risk. With the strength that the brain-eating insect had just shown, Lin Yi was not willing to fight it at close range even if he was beaten to death. If he was not careful, he would either die or be injured. If he attracted some powerful spirit beasts during his escape, the consequences would be hard to predict. While Lin Yi was planning, the brain-eating insect was also planning. It was not stupid. In fact, it had already seen through Lin Yi's intention. It knew that Lin Yi still had some strength left and could speed up to get rid of it at any time, but it still had absolute confidence. As far as it knew, any human practitioner had a limited amount of chi. Running for his life like this would consume a lot of his chi, and by the time he ran out of it, he'd be at the end of his rope, completely at its mercy. Moreover, it had a secret weapon. It was not afraid that Lin Yi would really escape from its palm. No matter how far Lin Yi escaped, it would be useless. It would always be able to grasp the opponent's position. One man and one beast continued like this for the whole night. Seeing that the sky was bright, the brain-eating insect finally felt that something was wrong. It could not help but mutter, "What's wrong with this human? Where did he get so much true energy?" It would never have thought that Lin Yi had a cheating device like the Jade Pendant Space. If it was purely a battle of consumption, he would naturally be in an invincible position. Just like now, Lin Yi was still alive and kicking. On the contrary, the brain-eating insect was a little overwhelmed. No matter how strong it was, it could not withstand a whole night of relentless pursuit. At this moment, Lin Yi's speed suddenly increased a lot. In the blink of an eye, He escaped out of the brain-eating insect's perception range. He's finally starting to use his true energy to escape. It seems that this human's true energy is almost consumed. The brain-eating insect was not surprised. Instead, it smiled proudly. No matter how fast you run, you won't be able to escape from my traces. Traces was the innate ability of the thousand-eyed wolf spider. Now, it had also become one of the abilities of the brain-eating insect. As long as it left a trace of undetectable spider silk on the other party, then no matter where the other party escaped, it would not be able to escape its pursuit. This spider silk was extremely thin. Not only was it invisible to the naked eye, but it was also difficult to distinguish it with divine sense. Previously, when Lin Yi deliberately delayed talking, the brain-eating insect was so cooperative because it wanted to beat him at his own game and leave a spider silk on Lin Yi. As the brain-eating insect said, it was very picky about its food. Once it targeted someone, it would definitely die. This was because it would use all kinds of methods, and it was impossible to guard against it. To be precise, it was impossible to guard against it at all. Lin Yi really did not notice the spider silk on his body. After all, this thing was too thin and too light. Even with his divine sense, it was difficult to detect it. Unless he had taken precautions and carried out a comprehensive and specialized inspection, even an immortal would fall for it. With such a brilliant tracking method, the brain-eating insect was naturally sitting on a fishing platform. No matter how fast and far Lin Yi escaped, in front of its traces, it would be a futile struggle. Chapter 52-36. However, at this moment, there was a sudden change. Lin Yi's trace suddenly disappeared from its mind without any warning. The brain-eating bug was stunned for a long time and could not say a word for a long time. It was still complacent that everything was under control. Wasn't this a slap in the face? After a long time, the brain-eating bug finally became angry. This cunning human. Could it be that he had discovered my tracks from the very beginning and had been acting in order to numb my senses? Damn bastard. Little did it know that Lin Yi did not know any traces at all. He just wanted to ensure that he could completely shake off the other party, so he completely transformed from the primordial spirit form to the primordial spirit form. No matter how clever the traces were, they still needed to be attached to a physical body to be effective. When Lin Yi transformed into the primordial spirit form, the spider silk had no place to attach, so it naturally lost its meaning. This was purely a coincidence. Fortunately, Lin Yi did not stop practicing for the past few months and mastered the switching between the primordial spirit form, the semi-primordial spirit form, and the primordial spirit form. Otherwise, he would have suffered a big loss unknowingly. After carefully confirming several times that the brain-eating bug did not catch up, Lin Yi finally returned to the primordial spirit form and returned to the ground. Although it was not impossible to maintain the primordial spirit form, after all, this state could be immune to most of the damage. However, once there was a special emergency, this state was also very fragile and could be said to have no defense. In this ancient trial ground with all kinds of dangers, the primordial spirit form was no different from a small boat drifting in the sea. Any huge wave could be a disaster. In contrast, the primordial spirit form was more likely to be injured, but at least he could use all kinds of trump cards. More importantly, Lin Yi was more used to this form that was close to his original body. Otherwise, he would always feel weird if he kept transforming into a primordial spirit and floating in the sky. After returning to the ground, the first thing Lin Yi did was to find Cooled and the rest. After all, they were still too weak. It would be fine if they were only facing a Foundation Establishment stage threat, but if they encountered a Golden Core stage spirit beast, the consequences were simply unimaginable. If this dragged on, Lin Yi really could not rest assured. However, it was not easy to find Cooled and the rest at this time. They had escaped for the whole night with the super butterfly microstep. Even if they were not completely in the opposite direction, the distance was definitely not a little bit. It was at least hundreds of miles away. In this vast ancient trial ground, it was easier said than done to find someone from such a far distance. It would be better if they were in a plain area with a clear view. At worst, they could just change into their primordial spirit form and float around in the sky. It would not be that difficult to find traces of Cooled and the others. However, There were primeval forests everywhere. They could not even see the situation under their feet when they were floating in the air, let alone looking into the distance. Especially since this place was similar to the previous trial ground, the divine sense could not be expanded too far. The only way Lin Yi could use now was to determine the route of Cooled and the rest, then rush to the front of the crowd at the fastest speed. At the same time, he maintained the largest range of divine sense perception to avoid any mistakes. This way, he would have a chance to meet with the rest in a short period of time. Lin Yi's speed was extremely fast. Even if he encountered a spirit beast along the way, there was no delay. After all, even the brain-eating worm could not catch up with his speed, let alone these ordinary spirit beasts. They wanted to block the way, but unfortunately, Lin Yi did not care about them at all. He directly rushed past them. They could only look at him in the dust. What could they do? After an hour, Lin Yi suddenly stopped. It was not a problem with his vital energy or physical strength, but because there were traces of humans in his divine sense perception. This position was unlikely to be Cooled and the rest, but Lin Yi still wanted to find out the specific situation. He did not mind helping the disciples of the Archaic Alliance along the way. He might even meet some familiar faces. Lin Yi frowned slightly. This place was not on the periphery of any main road. It was already deep in the jungle. He could vaguely find a series of footprints of human cultivators on the ground. However, this series of footprints stopped abruptly after reaching an open space. Lin Yi took a look at the surrounding environment. At first glance, it looked ordinary. There was nothing special, and there was no dangerous aura. There was even no trace of the activities of spirit beasts, which were very common in other places. The environment revealed a fresh and pleasant smell. It was completely a place like a paradise. More importantly, there were no human cultivators in the range of Lin Yi's divine sense perception. In other words, a person disappeared into thin air after coming here. Logically, unless this person could fly, otherwise, no matter how strong he would inevitably leave some traces. It was the same even if he climbed up the tree. The scene in front of him was a little inexplicable. He could not say that he could transform into the form of the primordial spirit like Lin Yi, right? Lin Yi could not figure out the reason at the moment, but he was sure that there must be something wrong with this environment. It was just that he did not know where the problem was. After continuing to observe for a while, he still did not find any abnormalities or flaws. Lin Yi decided not to waste any more time. The reason why he stopped was just a whim to see if he would encounter any familiar faces. For him, meeting with Cooled and the rest was the top priority. It was meaningless to continue to stay here. However, at the moment when he was ready to move, there was suddenly a slight movement behind him. Lin Yi did not look back, but his divine sense perception had already told him what happened. It was the sound of flowers blooming. Less than 3 steps behind him, a vermilion flower bud bloomed quietly at a place half the height of a person. It was bright, beautiful, and had a refreshing and elegant fragrance. Danger. Lin Yi immediately noticed the additional trace of inexplicable danger in the environment. It was obvious that the danger came from this beautiful flower that seemed harmless. As expected, the flower suddenly opened up in an instant. There were rows of ferocious saw teeth growing in the petals. The entire flower turned into a giant mouth that chose a person to swallow. Its momentum was as fast as lightning. It was about to swallow Lin Yi in one gulp.